Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening, as well as the highest-ranking commanding officer responsible for the army in this world. I hereby announce that the former GOPNG nation is renamed World Government Directly Subordinate Special Zone Number 0002, Demon Slayer World. If you think that's too long, you can call yourselves Zone Number 2 People or Demon Slayer World People from now on. Ha. 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 Immediately, his classic drawn-out mad laughter, like an invisible tsunami, swept across the major city. Chapter 368, The Sea Monsters Attacking the Fleet. Firearms that can rapid-fire like heavy machine guns at high speed but are as large as rifles and equipped for individual soldiers, new type grenades that are even more compact than stick grenades, and soldiers 2 meters tall suspected to be catalyzed by medicine. The person speaking was none other than Walpole, the Prime Minister of the Great John Bull Empire, a stout man in a suit with light blonde curly hair and a serious expression. The place he was in was the meeting room of the National Defense Intelligence Agency. Sitting at the meeting table in front of him were 13 military officers, including the bureau chief. What do you all think about these? Walpole first put down the intelligence document in his hand, scanned everyone, and asked in a deep voice. A staff officer from the National Defense Staff Department quickly suggested. If this is true, then I suggest immediately dispatching a fleet, and it must be done as quickly as possible, arriving at GOPNG nation before other countries. Indeed, their so-called declaration of world war is not just directed at us. Hans Tiger, Hairy Bear, White-Headed Eagle, and Rooster must have already known by now. The bureau chief nodded in agreement. Since that's the case, let's form an ocean-going fleet consisting of 5 dreadnoughts, 10 pre-dreadnoughts, and 52 destroyers and cruisers, with Admiral Norris as the commander. The current John Bull Empire was still in its historical peak. Its colonies occupied 1/5 of the world's land territory, its homeland population was 45 million. And its army and marines had a total military strength of 530,000. It possessed 62 battleships, over 200 cruisers and destroyers, and over 80 submarines. The reason Prime Minister Walpole assembled such a large-scale fleet was not primarily due to apprehension towards GOPNG nation, but to guard against encountering the marine fleets of other strong countries. For those new type weapons, the major marine fleets were very likely to center around GOPNG nation for an unprecedented century-long Great Sea Battle. Although it was said that the quantity of those weapons was large, there was more than enough to go around if divided. But if it was possible to monopolize them, it was better to do so. Indeed. Just as they thought, basically every country with a marines had dispatched fleets of varying scales to GOPNG nation. But in this era, the strong countries were basically on the European continent and across the Pacific Ocean. It would take at least 20 days for their fleets to arrive at GOPNG nation. This gave hope to several neighboring countries. For example, the Great Stick Country across the sea. This stick country could indeed be called great in this world. Not only did they own the entire peninsula, but they had even extended quite a bit northwards. Then there was the Mengma Empire, which occupied most of the zone, the White Elephant Empire next to it, and the various types of monkey countries in Southeast Asia. These countries' marine strength was actually very weak, possessing only a few second-hand goods bought from various European and American countries. Even the Mengma Empire was the same. Their main military power was still concentrated in the army, especially the cavalry and cannon. Coastal defense mainly relied on a large number of coastal defense cannons. So they planned to send army units to GOPNG nation from another direction while the Great Stick Country's fleet and the GOPNG nation's fleet were engaged in combat. Anyway, the Great Stick Country's warships wouldn't dare to easily open fire on them. East Blue. This ocean, sandwiched between the Great Stick Country and GOPNG nation, had an area of 978,000 square kilometers. At this moment, a small fleet composed of 3 destroyers and 5 torpedo boats was sailing at full speed towards the direction of Honshu Island. They rode the wind and waves, their aura aggressive. The face of every stick marine soldier on the deck was filled with an expression of pride. In this sea area, at this time, they were the strongest fleet. And they would be the first army to land on Geopangi Nation's homeland. Therefore, rounding up, we are now the world's #1 marine fleet. General Kim Won-hoon, Geopangi Nation's marines, both in scale and tonnage, are quite a bit stronger than ours. I think we should be more cautious and wait for the fleets from other countries, Sumida. Inside the flagship's bridge, a stick lieutenant colonel wearing a white military officer uniform looked worriedly at the sea surface ahead. He truly didn't think they could defeat Foot Basin Chicken, derogatory term S fleet, with just their own strength. Vice Captain Park, you're overthinking it. Currently, a subversive military coup is happening inside Foot Basin Chicken, derogatory term, nation. They simply cannot organize a fleet. This is a great opportunity that is hard to come by in 100 years. As long as we are the first to occupy Maizuru naval port, it's entirely possible to take all the warships inside. Compared to that, those so-called new type firearms and hand grenades are not worth mentioning. General Kim Won-hoon, whose military rank was Vice Admiral, said with full confidence. However, Sumida is an honorific in the stick language, so he didn't include it in his words. So that's how it is. Your wisdom is amazing. I was reckless and shouldn't have talked too much. Vice Captain Park lowered his head in shame. Ha ha ha, you're still young. In the future, Suddenly, just as General Kim Won-hoon was laughing with pleasure and reaching out his hand to pat the other person's shoulder to show encouragement, streaks of high water hashira shot up around each warship. The commotion and the scene of cannonballs hitting the sea surface were almost identical. This made the stick marine soldiers on the warships turn pale with fright. Enemy attack. Where are the enemy ships? Where are they opening fire from? Exclamations rose one after another. Everyone became nervous, gripping the rifles in their hands and scanning the distant sea surface, trying to find some black dots that were gradually growing larger. But these people on the deck saw nothing for a moment. Meanwhile, the soldiers standing in the crow's nest were stunned, watching the monsters rushing towards them. It turned out that, as the stirred-up water hashira returned to the Great Sea under the effect of gravity, those terrifying figures also appeared in midair. Boom, a thick and long light blue palm with fins growing between the fingers, carrying powerful energy, smashed the head of a stick soldier. Just like a watermelon, a large amount of blood splashed open. Ha 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 ha, kill all these otherworld ants. So fragile, these otherworlders' bodies are like bubble coating, they exploded without even using much strength. Stop talking nonsense, hurry and kill, but be careful not to damage this ship, otherwise, you're responsible for the consequences. No way, no matter what, it's a warship made of steel, how could it be damaged so easily? Only to see that it was actually a group of Fishman tribe members wearing navy uniforms, continuously landing heavily on the warship's deck from the air, and began the slaughter of the stick marines on the deck who were as terrified as rabbits. Monsters. My god, what are these things? Although they were all bare-handed, the absolute crushing in speed and strength made the scene extremely cruel and bloody from the start. Especially the fishmen's tall build, terrifying appearance, and mouths full of fangs, really just like the sea monsters in legend. This caused heavy damage to the stick marines' morale. There were also some brave people who pulled the trigger towards the fishmen. But it wasn't because their hands were shaking and they missed, or they were dodged. Even if they hit, those bullets actually just fell powerlessly to the ground, simply couldn't break through the opponent's skin. This wasn't because these fishermen's skin was too thick, but because they had all mastered Iron Body from the Six Powers. Compared to those fishmen on Fishman Island. As a member of the Marine Headquarters Fishmen's Special Forces, the biggest advantage was being able to access these martial arts, and Iron Body was the easiest technique for them to master. Chapter 369, Sure Use Thrill. What is it? Sea monsters. In the Naval Operations Command located in Pusan, Great Stick Country, the current Chief of General Staff, the 55-year-old Li Dishi, looked at the subordinate who came to report with astonishment. Yes, that was the last telegram message sent by Vice Admiral Jin Youngson's ship, the Daijoyong. It said that a group of sea monsters, over 2 meters tall and resembling humanoid fish, attacked them. The young man spoke with a heavy tone. Immediately order the 3rd Fleet from Mokpo Port to come for support, and also have people start laying the minefield. If they really are sea monsters, they will likely attack from the seabed like submarines. To be honest, Li Dishi didn't want to believe that sea monsters capable of annihilating a powerful fleet existed in the world, but the facts were before him. As the highest commander of the Marines, he had to take it seriously. Suddenly, a ground-shaking tremor, accompanied by a strong roar, struck, greatly shocking the naval personnel of all ranks within the command. Was that an earthquake? But why would an earthquake have explosion sounds? Stop talking nonsense. The alarm sound is ringing. Let's run out first. Soon, including Chief of General Staff Lee Dishie, the entire Navy base entered a state of emergency. Large numbers of naval personnel ran from their respective buildings to the open ground. But at this moment, they realized that the earthquake had passed quickly, and there was no longer any commotion. At the same time, the police department inside the city of Busan was in utter chaos. Director. It's Hundy. A giant holding a great saber has appeared over there and is moving rapidly towards the northwest direction. A police officer shouted anxiously. Huh? What nonsense are you talking about, you idiot? Director Puzingen looked over with an unimaginable expression, while the surrounding police officers wore expressions suggesting he had lost his mind. But it's true. On the other side, near the Hundy Grand Hotel, the area was already filled with continuous screams and sounds of terror. Large numbers of men and women were scrambling to escape in a frenzy. The scene of adults holding children, elderly people falling to the ground, and couples scattering in different directions could be seen everywhere. This scene was like a massive great tsunami about to rush in from the sea, like doomsday. A blonde giant, the height of a two-story building, walked quickly with powerful strides down the wide main street, completely ignoring the frantically fleeing Korean citizens around him. His black justice coat swayed up and down behind him in the air current. With every step he took, a web of cracks would appear on the originally relatively flat ground. This giant was naturally Whitebeard Edward Newgate. He had crossed the East Blue through the air using moonwalk. Upon arriving here, not wanting to continue flying, he chose to land directly and travel to the capital of this great stick country on foot. However, his massive body, maintaining a speed close to the speed of sound, shattered the ground the moment he landed on the beach. The surging air current pushed layers of sand, instantly burying everything within several hundred meters. Newgate paid no mind to this. Although he wasn't an evil person who enjoyed slaughtering civilians for fun, he wouldn't feel self-reproach or guilt for affecting them. Freedom and ease were the essence of a great pirate, even if he was no longer a pirate. But at this moment, a large group of Korean police officers holding firearms and wearing black uniforms appeared at the other end of the street. Among them, a person with more conspicuous attire was holding a loudspeaker and saying something to him. The problem was, how could Newgate understand any Korean language? They look like the army. If that's the case, then this old man won't hold back. Newgate narrowed his eyes, a dangerous cold light flashing within them. Not only did his steps not slow down, but he strode forward, his great Naginata Murakamagiri in his hand eager for combat. Fire! Fire! Seeing this scene, the Korean police officer holding the loudspeaker immediately understood that communication was impossible and quickly gave the attack order. Bang 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 bang, bullets shot out from the gunfire flash, streaking through the void. However, this seemingly terrifying bullet train was blocked by an invisible chi wall about 2 meters in front of the giant. This scene terrified all the Korean police. Their guns were useless, what could they do? The next second, Newgate swept the Murakamagiri in his hand horizontally in front of him. Instantly, the air in front of him boiled, becoming a crescent moon-shaped air blade emitting white light. Roar! In an instant, the police blocking the way, the cement-paved ground, the buildings, and even the citizens who hadn't run far, all vanished without a trace in the white light. Looking down at Busan from above, one could see a yellowish-brown fan-shaped zone. Along the way that followed, Whitebeard encountered various intercepts from the Great Stick Country. Large numbers of army units desperately surrounded and attacked him, while dozens of biplanes constantly flew overhead. Unfortunately, at this time, there were no fighter aircraft equipped with machine guns. Their only purpose was to take photos and provide intelligence to the higher-ups. Their strongest means was the indiscriminate bombardment from hundreds of field artillery. But these were completely unable to stop Edward Newgate's steps. He completely had the aura of someone directly attacking the capital, tirelessly fighting with the army of this other world. The plight experienced by the Great Stick Country was also being experienced by other countries. For example, in the neighboring Great Mingma Empire, the current Army General Twilight Reno, also known as Burned Eye World, had transformed into a black giant hundreds of meters tall, smashing through cities along the way. His choice was the same as Whitebeard's. After crossing the Great Sea, he didn't want to continue flying and instead planned to fight his way to the capital. Next to the Great Mingma Empire was the White Elephant Empire. Their capital, New Delhi, was currently bathed in brilliant golden light. The streets and alleys were filled with kneeling citizens, all kneeling in devout worship, tears streaming down their faces. In the air, Sengoku, who had transformed into a golden body Buddha, looked at this scene speechlessly. He had originally intended to wait for the army here to attack him before unleashing a shockwave with one palm. But he hadn't expected that as soon as he transformed, all these white elephant people would kneel down, shouting in a language he couldn't understand at all. However, their fanatical appearance was not difficult to comprehend. What should he do now? Maybe I can talk to their higher-ups. Someone should understand English language or Japanese language. Thinking this, Sengoku looked towards the magnificent Delhi Imperial Palace. Indeed, the king and nobility inside were also kneeling on the ground, worshipping him with great excitement. But the situation in the White Elephant country was purely an exception. Elsewhere, it was a bloody storm, especially the Indonesian monkey country in Southeast Asia, which had the misfortune of encountering Shiryu of the rain. Banjarmasin, originally an extremely prosperous large port city, was now utterly silent, as if there was no other commotion besides the sea waves, the wind, and the cry of birds. Splurt, on a certain street, as a flash of scarlet blade light swept past, 4 men and women, terrified to the extreme, were instantly decapitated. Immediately after, a pair of black boots stained with much blood stain appeared beside them. It's good when there are many people. What a thrill, Shiryu of the rain, wearing a black justice coat, with a smoking large cigar in his mouth, took a puff of smoke with a look of intoxication. When he exhaled the smoke, he lazily turned his head to look behind him. Following his gaze, one could only see corpses everywhere with tragic appearances, and the further one looked, the more there were. A large amount of fresh blood had truly become a river of blood on the streets. He had actually killed everyone in Banjarmasin. Chapter 370, Bullet's Thoughts on the Future. It was very strange. Just a moment ago, the sky was very clear, and warm sunlight shone down. After walking for a while, you would start to feel hot, but the azure sky paired with a few large white clouds was also a beautiful sight. For London, which was always rainy, this could be said to be quite rare good weather. But now, in the blink of an eye, it suddenly became covered in dark clouds, gloomy and oppressive, a vast, dark expanse that seemed to cover the entire sky, making people feel a bit breathless. This was what a middle-aged gentleman in a sharp suit by the River Thames felt. He, along with the nearby men and ladies, looked up at the thick black clouds overhead, their faces full of surprise. It wasn't just here. Professors and students at Oxford University, citizens riding in carriages on Tower Bridge, and believers walking out of St. Paul's Cathedral together. Even the guards standing guard and training inside Hampton Court Palace, all noticed the strange situation with the sky. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with the dark clouds themselves, but that they appeared too suddenly, giving the feeling that there was no transition at all. Look. What is that? In the center of London City, on Trafalgar Square. A blonde girl nestled in her boyfriend's arms, with her back to the fountain lake and the statue column of General Nelson, suddenly raised her finger and shouted. Her tall and handsome girly-haired boyfriend, along with the people around him, looked in the direction she pointed, but saw nothing but dark clouds. But just as people started to feel dissatisfied and were preparing to look at the girl with reproachful gazes, a hint of blue suddenly appeared in their line of sight, like a small azure fish that seemed to leap once in that ocean of black clouds, and then disappeared again. But this time, many people saw it. Was it a bird? Ah! Suddenly, screams began to ring out, because that hint of blue grew larger, or rather, it stretched out from the dark clouds. It was a claw with 5 fingers. Oh God, how is this possible? Exclamations rose and fell, and the entire atmosphere of London became restless. People outside the buildings no longer walked around, but stared dumbfounded at the sharp claws and long tail covered in blue scales, appearing and disappearing in the dark clouds. A snake? It seems to be a giant blue snake. My heavens, such a big snake, and it can fly in the sky? The gentlemen, ladies, and children of the entire city simply didn't know what to do. If you say call the police, didn't you see they were also dumbfounded? Just at this moment, 4 biplanes flew over from the direction of the Port of London. Their target was precisely the giant blue snake in the black clouds. Of course. They just wanted to take a few photos up close, and then return to the base to hand them over to the higher-ups. As for attacking, don't even think about it. These airplanes, aside from the pistols carried by the pilots, were not equipped with any weapons at all, and the ground troops were even more helpless. The current Great John Bull Empire does not yet have weapons that can reach high altitude. However, the Great Hans Tiger Empire across the English Channel has them. 7 years ago, they manufactured cannons specifically used for shooting airplanes and airships, and it is said that the maximum range reached 4 kilometers. Then 5 years ago, they continued to improve, manufacturing anti-aircraft guns with a 65mm caliber, a larger field of fire, and a maximum range exceeding 5 kilometers. Whirring, in the high altitude, below the black clouds, those 4 biplanes, driven by their front propellers, approached little by little. Just at this moment, watched by all of London, a blue-scaled snakehead, with a pair of buffalo horns on its forehead but a pair of goat horns on top of its head, peered out of the cloud layer. That terrifying gaze stared at the 4 airplanes. Is this an airplane? It looks no different from a little flying insect. As soon as Kaido spoke, it was like an invisible mental impact, making the men, women, old and young in the entire city below even more shocked. Their three views, which were already severely shaken, were completely shattered on the ground. It seems to be speaking. Ah, what language is this? It's a bit familiar. Foot basin chicken language, right? I'm not very sure. Just as everyone began to discuss animatedly, Kaido, however, opened that gaping maw, in which a ball of dazzling gunfire flash began to brew. He was preparing to give the capital of this country, which is said to be the world's strongest, a sufficiently magnificent meeting gift. This gift was Burrow Breath. Roar, an incredibly hot and incredibly bright giant pillar of flame, as if gushing down from the waterfall above the 9 heavens. That red gunfire flash shone on the faces of the people below, and they immediately felt a gust of hot wind blowing towards them. In the blink of an eye, the 4 biplanes attempting to escape were first engulfed in flame. Immediately after, the heaven-piercing pillar of flame was like a blade dropped by God, drawing a burning diagonal line in London Fortress. All the buildings and living beings along the way were all burned to ashes in the tsunami-like sea of fire. Oh God! In the upper levels of the castle at Hampton Court Palace, the current king of John Bull, tightly holding the Empress's hand, watched this scene in fear. Could this be the divine punishment you have sent down? But what crime have we committed? At the same time, the great Hans Tiger Empire, separated from the great John Bull Empire only by the English Channel, in a place on its homeland called Saxony. Over 100,000 army units and a large number of cannon positions were launching a fierce attack towards a colossus covered all over with cannon barrels and gun barrels, as if formed by the convergence of a large amount of earth and stone. Because behind them was the capital Berlin. In addition to this, more troops and more cannons were still pouring in from various places across the country. It's worth noting that they, who were known as the world's #1 army, had over 800,000 well-equipped army military strength. Ha 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 ha, it's good that you've come even more. Douglas Barrett was completely exhilarated, controlling the cannon barrels and gun barrels on his body and constantly exchanging cannon fire with them. Every time the opponent's cannon fire exploded on his body, that feeling of impact would make him even more excited. The key was, the quality of these Hans Tiger military personnel was very high. Even when facing a big monster like himself, even though tens of thousands had already been killed or wounded, they still endured the fear, gritted their teeth, and held their position. On this point alone, Bullet greatly admired them. This is an excellent military source. He had already dismissed the idea of completely crippling this Hans Tiger country. The current Bullet no longer viewed things from a pirate's perspective, but from the perspective of an army lieutenant general, or even a future army general. Or rather, simply from the perspective of a general. The purpose of the world government has never been to slaughter this world, but conquest. In the future, this world with a large population will definitely provide them with the military strength they need. Although the physical ability of these other worlders is very fragile, if they are just used as soldiers, then as long as they are equipped with corresponding weapons or operate armored vehicles, they can still play a role in a world war. Which is the so-called cannon fodder. However, not all cannon fodder is the same. This spirit of daring to fight shown by the Hans Tiger people definitely belongs to high-grade cannon fodder. In Bullet's vision, after having enough cannon fodder military strength in the future, the Sea Star soldiers on the homeland should abandon firearms and instead focus their energy on cultivating supernatural power, to become mid to high-end combat power. For example, martial arts, swordsmanship, devil fruit ability, and so on. Chapter 371, Drafting the Contract Terms for the Demon Slayer Nations. Under the ruthless push of the 5 elders, the Demon Slayer world suffered an unprecedented ravaging. The Great Bear Empire, chosen by Army General Akainu Sakazuki, has a city named Kirov located 790 kilometers from its capital, Moscow, situated on the Vyatka River. This place, even in summer, has a highest temperature of only 20 degrees Celsius, making it a quite cold region. But now, towering flames and rolling thick smoke dyed the sky black and red, and the air was filled with a smell of sulfur, as if a volcano had erupted here. The entire city had turned into a hell. In the distance, the Hairy Bear follow-up forces who had just arrived watched in horror as the city was completely submerged by magma. They knew that their previous friendly forces were finished. A moment later, a fiery red figure slowly came towards them. That giant-like size, the magma flowing all over his body, and the radiant heat emanating from him made the Hairy Bear soldiers at the front tremble with fear. It's really a monster. A Hairy Bear colonel muttered to himself, but immediately he gritted his teeth fiercely and issued the order to open fire in a heavy tone. Roar, roar, roar. In an instant, a large amount of cannon fire covered the area, and explosion fireballs rose up one after another within sight. However, these only lasted for a dozen seconds before being submerged by a torrent of magma that surged up like a tide, sweeping mightily towards their direction. A tsunami. It should be said that this was a giant tsunami composed entirely of magma, overwhelming everything, as if the gates of hell had opened. Sakazuki clearly understood the objective of this combat. It was to make these powerful nations of the other world never again muster the courage to resist or defy the world government, and obediently become subordinate worlds providing all resources. That's why he chose to destroy a city near Moscow, rather than Moscow itself. On the other side, compared to these terrifying guys who like to fight and kill, Charlotte Linlin stepped on Thundercloud Zeus and arrived at the Italy Wolf Nation. She had previously inquired with the head of Cypher Paul at the Stargate base. The country in this world most skilled at making dessert, she heard, was this Italy Wolf Nation. Oh, and also the neighboring Gaul Rooster Empire. Rome. This is a world-famous city with over 2,400 years of history, known as the Eternal City on the European continent. Its city center covers an area of over 1,000 square kilometers, making it the largest city in the Italy Wolf Nation by area and population, and also the center of Catholicism in the whole world. More. I want more tiramisu, more cassata cake, and this strawberry jam donut. Mama she was seen sitting on the rooftop of the Pantheon, her legs dangling back and forth below, constantly throwing various desserts from a large iron basin into her mouth. When she ate happily, she laughed non-stop with excitement, occasionally loudly urging the people below. At this time, around the Pantheon stood the country's nobility, officials, and police officers. There was also a long line formed by soldiers, laboriously passing large iron basins filled with freshly made dessert over their heads, and finally having to climb a temporarily built stairs to deliver them to this goddess. The other end of this long line was connected to the huge kitchen of the Rome Street Regis Hotel, which was the only building still relatively intact, several hundred meters away. Here, nearly 100 chefs wearing tall white hats were nervously making one exquisite dessert after another, which were then sent out like on an assembly line. It could be said that to satisfy Big Moom's incredibly enormous appetite and eating speed, the higher-ups of the Italy Wolf Nation had forcibly summoned all of Rome's best chefs. There was nothing they could do, they couldn't beat her. Look around, why is this hotel said to be the only one still relatively intact? Centered around the Pantheon, buildings and streets within a radius of several hundred li had long since become vast, dilapidated ruins. There were shell craters, burn marks from fire, and even many shocking bloodstains. Under the combined might of Zeus and Prometheus, nearly 40,000 Italy Wolf army, countless civilians, and the city center were all destroyed under Reu and a sea of fire. Now, they were completely subdued, and the names Zeus and Prometheus were simply too astonishing. These were all names originating from the myths of the European continent. Now they had truly appeared alive before their eyes, and seemed to be the subordinate gods of this female giant, although their appearance was completely different from the legends. But who could say exactly what Zeus and Prometheus were supposed to look like? No one. So these Italy Wolf people had completely come to regard Charlotte Linlin as the supreme goddess, transcending Zeus and Prometheus. And based on her frequent self-proclamation as Mama. She was most likely Rhea, the daughter born to the earth goddess Gaia and the sky god Aranos in ancient Greek myth, the wife of Cronus, and thus the second-generation queen of the heavens. Then why did Prometheus also call her Mama? This doesn't match the accounts in myth. Well, of course, the myth is wrong. See Star Mainland, inside the command center of the Otherworld Strategy Committee building. Vice Chairman Kong Ming, news has arrived from Kaido's side. He has completed the mission of suppressing the capital of the John Bull Empire and is returning. A young technician in front of the control console took off his headphones and relayed the news received from the Stargate base in the Demon Slayer world. In that case, everyone is back except for Shiryu and Big Moom. Kong Ming watched a large screen wall composed of dozens of projection screens with his arms crossed. Whenever he mentioned the names of these two people, he felt helpless. One had completely become a manifestation of a god of slaughter in Southeast Asia. Wherever he went, no one survived. Even when he sent a warning, he only received a perfunctory response. The other was traveling around the European continent, wreaking havoc on one country after another that was famous for classic desserts. As long as they dared to resist or not engage in cooperation, they would either be baptized by thunderstorms or bathed in a sea of fire. The extent of her recklessness was simply dumbfounding. Later, after she said that as long as she was given enough delicious dessert, she wouldn't easily resort to violence, the profession of chef became the most urgently needed in all European countries. A moment later, the technician helplessly conveyed this. Big Moom's side said not to worry about her, she'll come back on her own when she's satisfied. Sigh, forget it, let's not bother with her. But strictly order Shiryu to return to the base within 5 days, otherwise, He'll be permanently stationed in the Demon Slayer world. Yes. After sternly issuing the order, Kong Ming turned and returned to the committee members' exclusive meeting room. Ah, Kong Ming, you're just in time. Based on the intelligence we've gathered so far, we're preparing to draft a set of contract terms to be signed with the countries of the Demon Slayer world. Chairman Fernandez greeted him with a smile. Take a look. Okay. Kong Ming sat down and picked up the document the other person pushed over from the table. As expected, there were sections of handwritten writing on it. Number 1, the world government and the Demon Slayer world mutually agree to maintain a subordinate relationship. The governments of the countries of the Demon Slayer world are willing to provide all resources needed by the world government in the future, including manpower, minerals, technology, food, etc. Article 1. The countries of the Demon Slayer world promise that all personnel of the world government may move freely within their territories and enforce the world government's law. Article 2. The countries of the Demon Slayer world voluntarily agree to replace all existing national currencies with the berry currency issued by the world government. Article 3. The countries of the Demon Slayer world agree to relinquish military ownership, retaining only a police force, with the number limited to no more than 100,000. After the existing army is reorganized by the world government, the remaining soldiers will regain civilian status. Furthermore, the world government has the right to freely conscript soldiers within the Demon Slayer world, and each country has the obligations to fully cooperate with the escort. Article 4. Chapter 372, Army Admiral Candidate, Sand Crocodile. Above the White Sea, 10,000 meters high, the Noah's Ark had returned from Burka Island to Elbai, which was originally God's Island but is now the Air Force headquarters. Im was currently in his inner chambers, carefully reviewing various documents sent from the Five Elders. The document he held now was the Subordinate Relationship White Paper between the world government and the Demon Slayer world drafted by the Other World Strategy Committee. The people below plan to convene a special world conference in the newly confirmed Zone Number 2 in the Demon Slayer world a month later, gathering all heads of state from that world who possessed a certain level of influence to sign this overbearing document. Calling it an unequal treaty would be putting it mildly. They're really ruthless, these guys. Im couldn't help but laugh as he looked at the unreasonable and completely one-sided terms listed. Look at the general meaning of this term. It prohibits all countries from owning and building warships, and all existing warships are to be confiscated. However, they will be temporarily stored at the original Navy bases, and will be transferred in batches as the various Navy bases being expanded in Zone Number 2 are gradually completed. During this period, all countries are obligated to ensure the normal operation of the bases and the integrity of the warships and various equipment. And this term, the world government has the right to conscript any talent within the Demon Slayer world, and all countries are obligated to safely escort them to Zone Number 2. So that's it, turning the Geopangi nation into a directly controlled territory. Im noticed that besides the terms, there were many explanations and introductions, likely because the Other World Strategy Committee was worried the Five Elders might find it difficult to understand. Large numbers of Navy ports and Air Force bases are planned to be built on the periphery for research, manufacturing, and docking of various warships, submarines, and airplanes. Internally, there will be a world government branch responsible for administrative management, with offices set up in Osaka. As for the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, it will serve as a traveling palace for celestial dragons who visit in the future. There is also an Academy of Science branch for absorbing and settling scientific talent from that world. So that's how it is. The Other World Strategy Committee realized that there would be more Other World personnel entering the Sea Star mainland in the future, so they planned to set a series of requirements and conditions. For example, these scientists from the Demon Slayer world need to continue their research at the Academy of Science branch in Zone Number 2 first. Only after accumulating sufficient merit can they be promoted to the Academy of Science headquarters on the homeland. The same applies to talent in other fields, such as doctors, soldiers, economists, climatologists, and so on. As the world government's processes and regulations in this regard become more perfect, it is imaginable that the difficulty for other worlders to travel to the Sea Star mainland will become increasingly high in the future. But with such harsh terms, those countries will probably cause quite a stir again, hee. Im could imagine that the Demon Slayer world would face no shortage of troubles next, but these could be left for the Five Elders to handle. Anyway, so far, they had done quite well. Impel Down is requesting to incorporate Ms. Nkigutsuji and Nottheim into the prison guards, and the Biochemical Research Institute is requesting to allow Ms. Nkigutsuji to participate in research projects as an intern researcher. Seeing this, Im's mood became one of both laughter and tears. What a Ms. Nkigutsuji! Although a bit timid, he is indeed worthy of being a boss-level character. He can even thrive in a place like Impel Down. And this Nottheim. The application report stated that Warden Columbus believed Nottheim, nicknamed the Ogre of the Castle, possessed the ability to change the spatial layout inside buildings and to teleport objects or creatures within buildings using her blood demon art. If she could use this ability to assist him or future wardens in controlling Impel Down, it would not only greatly increase work efficiency but also further increase the difficulty for prisoners to escape. Just imagine, when a prisoner has just run to the first floor above ground, with a crispy wah sound in their ear, they are sent back to the 4th underground level. What kind of despair would that be? Of course, Warden Columbus had not forgotten the issue of controlling Nottheim, so the pet ring would continue to be worn around her neck. As for the slave King Tklama, his shadow had long been cut off by Gecko Moria and stored together with the shadows of those heinous criminals at the adjacent Marine headquarters. And Gecko Moria's clansmen were still locked up in the blazing hell where the warden's office is located. Alright, let Mizzen shine and contribute in Impel Down. But just as Im was about to pick up his pen to annotate his opinion, he saw another report from the Biochemical Research Institute. However, this time it wasn't an application, but an inquiry. It asked if they were allowed to use Nezuko Kamato's demon blood to try and compensate for Mizzen Kibutsuji's fatal weakness of fear of sunlight. This question made him pause for a moment. He continued reading. It turned out that these black scientists were curious about the perfect being Mizzen Kibutsuji mentioned. Also, they planned to develop a biochemical drug based on Mizzen's lineage factor, genes, that would allow normal humans to possess rapid self-healing and body regeneration abilities without needing to eat people and drink blood. Although Dr. Shawai from the Kabanuri world had already discovered that Kabanuri, who are half human half Kabanuri, also possess the self-healing ability of limb regeneration, it still takes nearly 2 months under sufficient nutrition. Not only is the efficiency too slow, but it also requires becoming a Kabanuri. If Mizzen Kibutsuji had not appeared, Dr. Shawai's discovery would certainly have attracted great attention, but now it was somewhat redundant. Furthermore, the Kabanuri virus is extremely fond of high-temperature environments and can cause the surrounding liquid to undergo liquid high-temperature transformation in minutes. This created great difficulty in producing potions. Therefore, biochemists led by Dean Fritz, including Caesar, Queen, and others, set their sights on Mizzen. However, they were concerned that with Mizzen's current lineage factor, the potion produced would also give people the weakness of fear of sunlight, so they wanted to make him an existence that is not afraid of sunlight first. This. Im pondered for a moment after reading. Even if Mizzen is no longer afraid of sunlight, what difference does it make? If Moria cuts off his shadow, won't he still be afraid of sunlight? Moreover, it won't affect his genes, and coupled with the pet ring around his neck, the guarding of 2 great experts, Magellan, and the adjacent Marine headquarters, there's no way he can cause trouble. Mainly, he felt that if there really was a gene serum that could allow people to quickly recover dismembered limbs and bodies, even if the effect wasn't as strong as Mizzen's, it would still be of great value. Ultimately, he agreed to this plan. Oh, to grant Crocodile the epithet of Army Admiral candidate? Im picked up another document and glanced at it, chuckling lightly. That's right. Whether it was the arrest of Mizzen Kibutsuji and Nottheim, or being responsible for commanding 200,000 army troops to occupy the entire Geopenji nation, he can be said to have made significant merit. The key is his strength. Crocodile's spirit had long since recovered, and as the scale of the troops he commanded grew larger, his aura also became increasingly imposing. This directly led to his haki also rising steadily. Only his mastery of the sand fruit is still not as strong as his canon counterpart 23 years later. Alright, the epithet will be Sand Crocodile. There's no more suitable one besides that. Chapter 373, Air Force Headquarters and the Shandia. Pururu. Just as Im was listening to soothing music and reviewing government documents, the golden transponder snail opened its eyes and called out. The next second, without him making any visible movement, the transponder snail automatically flew to his side. As the handset on its back gently floated up, a pleasant, charming female voice immediately spoke. It was Stussy. Lord St. Nerona, the construction team from the construction department has arrived at Elbai. Understood. Im placed the document he was holding on to the desk and stood up. Vaguely visible on it were words like Sea Transport King and White Dragon. Arriving outside the palace, he first glanced at the young Enel who was desperately lifting weights in the plaza, training his physical ability, and Tesoro who was practicing moonwalk under the guidance of a Cypher Paul member. Not far away, Stussy was still quietly waiting with a towel and water. This scene had become the recent norm here. However, his main reason for coming out this time was to see Pika and Teach, who had manifested as construction workers. Although he could have the live broadcast screen feed transferred to the visual Den machine nearby, Im decided to walk to the Ark's edge and see for himself. While his vision was far inferior to that of a glint fruit ability user with a vision range of 4,000 kilometers, seeing over 10 kilometers was not a problem. But after watching for a moment, he found it rather uninteresting. because they were cutting trees. Of course, there was nothing wrong with this. This Elbai Island was covered by a sea of trees for 99% of its total area. To build the Air Force headquarters here, it definitely needed to be cleared. But what Im wanted to see was the scene of Pika and Teach building using their abilities. Lord, this is the design blueprint for the Air Force headquarters sent by the construction department. Just as he was feeling disappointed, Stussy, still in her black dress, black stockings, and high heels, walked over, twisting her curvaceous figure. She then controlled the transponder snail to project the design blueprint into midair. So many airplane runways. It seems they've absorbed the experience from the Demon Slayer world. Im examined the design blueprint with interest. The outline of this Elbai Island was almost identical to Marine Headquarters Manaford, both resembling a large circle missing a gap. That gap just happened to form a standard base surrounded by land on three sides, a terrain absolutely suitable for a port. However, compared to Manaford, Elbai had a towering giant vine in its center that reached the sky. So, the Air Force headquarters on this design blueprint spread out around it, with straight horizontal and vertical runways marked out around the periphery. Looking at the files noted on it, the total area of the Air Force headquarters was 1,126 square kilometers, which was also the total area of Elbai Island. It had 3 main runways, each 10 kilometers long, facing north, west, and east respectively, and 21 intersecting turning runways, each 1 kilometer long. In terms of buildings, besides the necessary headquarters fortress, the first phase of the plan was to build 700 military officer villas and 250 dormitory buildings, each 10 stories high, capable of accommodating 200,000 personnel. There were also necessary large maintenance factories, a large Air Force hospital, a large Air Force restaurant, and venues with various training functions. On top of this, a certain amount of green space was guaranteed, so not all trees would be cut down. Finally, the estimated completion time was written as 1 year. 1 year. Im remembered that in his previous life, a country that had maxed out its infrastructure skills would take at least 4 to 5 years to build a large airport. What kind of concept was this? It was equivalent to building an 18-story tall building every day. But the current world government's efficiency was 4 to 5 times that, which was truly terrifying. Of course, he also understood that the abilities of Pika and Teach definitely played a major role in this. It seems I'll have to treat them better in the future. This is really good. Im's appreciative gaze passed through the layers of void below Noah's Ark, seeing Pika and Teach sitting at a concrete table piled high with food in the camp, eating and drinking heartily. The two seemed to be getting along quite well. One was eating meat in large bites, while the other was grabbing cherry pies and constantly throwing them into his mouth, chatting and laughing from time to time. It seems Teach has adapted to his new identity. Im was very satisfied with this point and immediately turned back to his palace. There were 3 things that were mandatory in his daily plan. One was reading the important reports sent by the 5 elders, which took about 2 hours. Then, using Yamato, his soul would enter the land of the Yellow Springs to slay the evil spirits in the underworld to increase his soul's strength, thereby indirectly increasing his strength in all aspects. This took about 7 hours. Actually, it used to take over 12 hours, but recently he had added a new mission for himself. Reading books. Books related to medicine. The target was to first memorize all of them. His previous life self definitely couldn't do this, but with his current memory, the difficulty wasn't high. The main difficulty lay in the tediousness and length. Below. On Elbai Island, the Shandia people, also in the construction department camp, were watching towering trees fall to the ground one after another before their eyes. To them, this sound was the trees' sorrowful cries. This island was called Jaya, ancestral land, and homeland by them. Cutting trees was a matter that, according to their tradition, should be treated with caution and would never be done easily unless absolutely necessary. But now, they also held a logging chainsaw in their hands. Why must we also join the tree-cutting team? Your manpower seems sufficient. Geronimo, as the descendant of great warrior Kalgaura and the father of the future war demon Wiper, the strongest Shandia warrior at present, questioned the construction department official in front of him with a dark face. They had previously tried to dissuade these people from their plan to cut trees, even begging them. But the result, naturally, goes without saying. However, the construction department official still explained the situation to them, which was the fact that this place was about to become the Air Force headquarters. If the Shandia people insisted on obstructing or resisting, not only would all the treatment they had previously been given be cancelled, but they would also be branded as criminals for the crime of defying the world government and escorted to the East Blue for bridge building. What treatment? 1. The world government allowed the Shandia people to continue residing and living in Cloud Hidden Village, and prohibited others from entering without permission. They would also preserve a circle of forest near their village. 2. The world government allowed the Shandia warriors to join the Air Force headquarters or join the logistics department and have formal work. 3. The world government allowed the Shandia children to receive normal cultural education in the Air Force headquarters school. To put it simply, they were willing to accept them as part of the world government. And what the Shandia people had to pay was this island that originally belonged to them, although it was useless even if they were unwilling to pay. But this was enough to show the world government's mercy. Therefore, the construction department official was now looking at them impatiently. He felt that these Shandia people were a bit ungrateful. You have several hundred people. With several hundred more people working together, efficiency will definitely increase. Or are you planning to eat free food without working? Stop talking nonsense, hurry up and get to work. Chapter 374, The Foot Basin Chicken Emperor arrives on the Sea Star mainland. A dark space, cold iron walls and ground, subtly swaying. 17 men and women, including the elderly, middle-aged, and young, were numbly squeezed into this prison cell of less than 30 square meters. Some buried their heads between their legs and arms, while others nervously watched the empty corridor outside the bars. The atmosphere was oppressive, making it hard to breathe. They were prisoners. Previously, they were the imperial family of a country. Among them were viscounts, marquises, princes, and even the emperor and empress. That's right. These people were the former imperial family members of the Foot Basin Chicken Nation from the Demon Slayer world. They were first escorted by the army through the Stargate in the Aokigahara forest, then crossed the Red Line by car, and finally handed over to the newly formed Air Force, who sent them to their destination on this flying warship. Of course, these Air Force officers and Air Force soldiers were still personnel drawn from the Marine headquarters. The plan was to transfer 200,000 people. However, the Air Force headquarters has not yet been built, and there are only about 10 flying warships, so the first batch only transferred enough soldiers to fill these flying warships, which was less than 20,000. Officers above the rank of major were mainly selected if they were proficient in moonwalk or possessed flying ability. Regarding the uniforms, they looked like the opposite of the Marines. The soldiers' shirts were blue, their pants were white, and they wore white scarves around their necks. The officer's coat of justice had a beautiful sky blue base color with white lettering. It was like two white clouds floating in a clean blue sky, and the golden shoulder insignia on their shoulders was the dazzling Sunday we've arrived. Come out. At this moment, an Air Force major wearing a blue coat appeared outside the prison cell with 4 private first-class soldiers, escorting the other World Imperial family members onto the deck. Report, Vice Admiral Marco, all 17 prisoners have been brought. Hearing the major's voice, a young man standing by the ship's railing, looking out ahead, turned around. He was over 2 meters tall, with punk-style blonde hair that looked very much like a pineapple. Because the windbreak on the warship blocked the strong wind outside, his coat of justice lay flat against his back. It was none other than the former 1st Division commander of the Whitebeard Pirates, now a citizen of the Whitebeard Kingdom and the Vice Admiral of the Air Force headquarters, Phoenix Marco. He was only 23 years old this year, so he appeared very young and full of vigor, with a faint, gentle smile on his face. Marco was not a person who liked slaughter, so when he was carrying out the mission to suppress the Bald Eagle United States in the Demon Slayer world, he merely leveled the place called the White House and returned to the Stargate camp. After Whitebeard also returned from the Great Stick Country, they returned to the Sea Star mainland together. However, King, who went with him, chose to stay behind, diligently suppressing group after group of armies, for reasons unknown. Wano country is almost here. No, it's Wano Island now. Later, you'll take them down and hand them over to the ninja of the Sea Ninja village. Marco looked at the approaching island, which resembled a stake, with a face full of emotion. This reminded him of Kazuki Oden, Lady Toki, and the others. Momonosuke and Hori were both born on the Moby Dick back then. Now, things have changed. He thought they must have reunited in the land of the Yellow Springs by now. Actually, Marco didn't particularly like Kazuki Oden in his heart, because after joining his own crew, he then joined the Roger Pirates crew. He felt this was a betrayal. But since Old Man had agreed, there wasn't much he could say. Half an hour later, the 17-foot Basin Chicken Imperial family members, including the Emperor and Empress, were handed over by the Air Force to a group of ninja wearing headbands and black clothes at Port Itachi in the Kuri region. The leader was Hotei, a Jonin from the Sea Ninja village, a man 2 meters tall with a sturdy physique, surrounded by a circle of white cloud-like smoke. The people have been confirmed received. Farewell. Hotei didn't say anything more, waving his hand sternly behind him. The 17 ninjas stepped forward according to the instruction, each picking up a Foot Basin Chicken Imperial family member, and then swish 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 turned into afterimages and disappeared from the spot, completely disregarding whether the people in their hands could withstand such speed. Bang, Arriving at a corner somewhere at the foot of Mount Fuji in the flower capital, the Foot Basin Chicken Emperor was the first to be thrown onto the ground, but he had already fallen unconscious. However, the other young royalty and nobles first vomited uncontrollably, then vaguely raised their heads amidst dizziness, subconsciously wanting to observe the surrounding environment. But upon raising their heads, the first thing they saw was a large red torii. They were naturally familiar with this thing. Their gaze continued through the torii, and they saw a tall mountain reaching into the clouds, with its peak covered in white snow like Mount Fuji. Where is this? You want us to live here? A middle-aged prince's expression was pale, and he wiped the saliva from his mouth, but his gaze towards the black-clothed ninja was filled with both fear and terror, so his speaking voice trembled noticeably. But none of the ninja answered him, merely staring expressionlessly, which made the atmosphere in the court gradually turn eerie. It's time. At this moment, Hotei looked up at the sun overhead and ordered, "Send them on their way." Swish swish swish, all the black-clothed ninja drew the katana from their backs. The sharp blades gleamed with cold light, making the expression of the Foot Basin Chicken Imperial family members turn pale. "You're going to kill people. Our country has already been taken by you, and we pose no threat to you. Why do you want to kill us? No. Don't. Please, let me just be a civilian, just let me live, truly, just let me live." These people were practically scared to death, kneeling on the ground and crying and wailing for mercy, even forcefully banging their heads on the ground, not stopping even when their foreheads bled. But the ninja of the Sea Ninja village were indifferent, slowly walking closer step by step. Is that the Emperor? On a small mountain slope in the distance, the former Sound Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps, Tenjin Yuzui, watched with complex feelings as the imperial family members of his former country continuously fell into a pool of blood under the ninja's cleavers. It was the first time he had seen the Emperor, but he knew about the saying of being a descendant of Amaterasu Mikami. In the hearts of the citizens of the Foot Basin Chicken Nation, the Emperor was not a human, but a god. But now this god was being dragged to another world and slaughtered like a pig or dog. But why? If they were going to kill them, why bring them here? Tenjin Yuzui was very confused. A moment later, seeing that the ninja there had already started cleaning up the corpses, he had a guess in his heart. Could it be that they were killing them for him to see? Or rather, were they killing them for those who came from the Demon Slayer world to see? For example, the Yubu Yashiki family and the Jing family who are now settled in the flower capital. Perhaps they are also seeing this screen feed through transponder snails right now. Deterrence? Besides this, Tenjin Yuzui couldn't think of any other reason. He immediately shook head and disappeared from the spot with a heavy heart. But what he didn't know was that in another domain invisible to his naked eye, a skeleton reaper wearing a large black robe and holding a huge scythe collected the souls of the Emperor and others who were struggling in terror. The underworld was too boring before. I hope this time it will be more lively. Chapter 375, A Towering Tree Grown Overnight. Water 7. Directly opposite Shipyard Number 1, what was originally Scrap Island piled high with various broken ships, has now been transformed by the construction department into the Sea Train Research Base, clean, orderly, with well-arranged buildings and wide, flat streets. It is also the future Sea Train main station. Looking down from above Water 7, one can see an expanse of seashell white roofs. The visual effect is very beautiful. Recently, many local residents or tourists who came to order ships specifically went to the higher levels of the city just to admire it. Gradually, some people began to call this sea train base the Snow Seashell. At this moment, the port pier has been temporarily blockaded by the Marines. Many staff and researchers who heard the news are specifically standing outside the blockade line, gazing out at the sea surface. And inside the blockade line, Deputy Division Chief Jerome, who is from the Administrative Department Maritime Affairs Division and also serves as the base commander, is standing together with Mr. Tom and the current Mayor Manon, talking and laughing. Behind them are Miss Kokro, Iceberg, Frankie, 4 division-level officials from the Maritime Affairs Department, and officials from the Water 7 city government. Almost here, right? Didn't they say they'd be here at 1? It's already 1:25. Hey, you know how the climate is in the Grand Line, how can it be truly on time? But they should be coming from underwater. Ah, they're here. Just as the surrounding crowd was discussing animatedly, the sea surface within the port suddenly surged upwards, bulging at a speed visible to the naked eye. Roar, when the massive creature underwater tore off its sea cloak, large waves of water splashed in all directions. Immediately, a rainbow formed above under the sunlight, creating a beautiful scenery. Wow! Instantly, exclamations rose continuously in the court. A giant green-shelled sea turtle appeared in the port, accompanied by 2 equally giant flounders on either side. Their entire bodies were covered by a transparent bubble, and various houses built with seashells or coral were constructed on their backs. So many fishmen. Where are the mermaids? Didn't they say many beautiful mermaids would come? These otaku men and women who have long worked and lived at the base strained their necks and widened their eyes, searching for what they desired in their hearts on the three giant beasts. But after looking for a long time, all they saw were fishman soldiers wearing armor and holding steel forks, or clearly middle-aged and elderly fishmen with wrinkles. Let alone mermaids, there weren't even any female fishmen. On the other side, Deputy Division Chief Jerome and the others ignored the noise outside and greeted the guests from Fishman Island with smiles, who were walking down from the back of the Great Sea Turtle by stepping on wooden boards. First, the Sea King Army's fishman soldiers ran down, standing tall and straight in neat queues on both sides. Then came the Ryugu Palace's left minister, a catfish fishman, leading Fisher Tiger, who was already an officer in the Sea King Army, and an unfamiliar old fishman behind him. Welcome to Water 7, I am Jerome, the base commander here. Deputy Division Chief Jerome took the initiative to greet them first. Although Mayor Manon was the host, he didn't dare to contend with a World Government Division level official for this. He could only wait for Jerome to finish before stepping forward solemnly and shaking hands with the left minister. I am Mayor Manon here. On behalf of all the citizens of Water 7, I express my sincere gratitude for the help provided by Fishman Island. The left minister smiled and said, You are too kind. Water 7 has also paid us sufficient compensation. It is a fair transaction between us, there is no need for this. No, if our island can stop being invaded by the Aqua Laguna just by paying money, then this is definitely a great grace. Mayor Manon said in a deep voice. For this island, the most famous shipbuilding island in the world, while its wealth is not so abundant that it doesn't need consideration, it is still quite wealthy. This must be Mr. Tom, right? I've heard a lot about you for a long time, and finally, we meet today. After exchanging a few words with the mayor, the left minister turned his gaze to Mr. Tom beside him. His Majesty Neptune asked me to convey to you that once the sea train research is completed, if you have time, you must return to Fishman Island. He will hold a celebratory banquet for you in Ryugu Palace. Ryugu Palace, huh? If I have the chance, I really want to see it. Mr. Tom said with emotion, then smiled and asked. Can I bring a few people with me then? Upon hearing this, Iceberg and Frankie behind him immediately showed expressions of anticipation. Of course you can, but not too many. The left minister teased them, then introduced the elderly fishman behind him, a bonito fishman with silver-white skin. This is Engineer Boyle, the highest person in charge of managing and maintaining the air reservoir. Oh, right, you can also call him Dr. Boyle, because he has been granted doctorate qualification and an epithet by the World Government's Academy of Science. Hearing these words, everyone, including Deputy Division Chief Jerome, was moved. One was a World Government Division level official, another was the mayor of an island directly under the World Government. The other was the world's #1 shipwright who had already stepped halfway into the Academy of Science and was promised that as long as he developed the sea train, his crime would be washed away and he would be granted doctorate qualification. Therefore, they all understood what an Academy of Science doctor represented. Such individuals would receive a high degree of attention and protection from the world government. According to the latest regulations, the severity of the consequences for harming them is basically second only to the celestial dragons. Hello everyone, the project to build the air reservoir in Water 7 will be fully under this old man's responsibility from now on. I hope everyone can fully cooperate. Dr. Boyle said with a serious expression. Of course, you can tell us whatever you need. Mayor Manon eagerly agreed, then asked expectantly. May I ask how long this air reservoir will take to complete? It will take at least 4 years. Huh? Everyone was stunned. Deputy Division Chief Jerome looked at Dr. Boyle in confusion. Why does it take so long? Because we need to plant trees first, Yarukiman mangroves, and they need to reach a height of at least 20 meters. This growth process will take about 3 years. Seeing that they still didn't understand, Dr. Boyle continued to explain. For bubbles to last a long time, besides needing air, they must also have enough mangroves. And the bigger the bubble, the more are needed. But I remember there weren't many mangroves on Fishman Island? Mr. Tom asked with a confused expression, scratching the back of his head. That's because next to our Fishman Island is the Sun Tree Eve, which is itself the world's largest Yarukiman mangrove. Speaking of this, Dr. Boyle's eyes showed a look of reverence. He had always felt that the existence of the Sun Tree was the greatest grace to the Fishman tribe. But if it's just planting trees, it doesn't seem like you need to come in person, right? Mayor Manon asked. This old man came this time to observe the situation of this island on site, and then determine the planting position of each mangrove and the future placement location of the air reservoir. At this point, the left minister interjected, smiling. So this time we not only brought enough mangrove saplings, but also brought a lot of soil suitable for their growth. Yes, after seeing it, this old man will go back. I'll bring people and equipment back in 3 years. I see. Mayor Manon nodded, feeling a bit disappointed. He had thought it could be completed within a year, thinking he wouldn't have to worry about next year's Aqua Laguna. But he immediately regained his spirit. 3 or 4 years is 3 or 4 years, at least there's hope, right? Do you need manpower for planting trees? We in Water 7 can gather many young and strong people to help. No need, we have already invited professionals from the Sabati archipelago who are responsible for tending to the mangroves. Dr. Boyle shook his head. Water 7 only needs to provide enough guides to take them to the planting locations, and then look after those saplings in the subsequent time. 2 weeks later, the 40 mangrove saplings brought by the left minister and the others were successfully planted in their corresponding positions in Water 7. During this time, Dr. Boyle also completed his investigation. But on the morning of the day after they were preparing to return to Fishman Island, successive exclamations rang out in Water 7. What's going on? Because the snow seashell is located outside Water 7, the overall changes in Water 7 can be easily observed from here. Dr. Boyle, Mr. Tom, the left minister, Tiger, and others stared dumbfounded at the Yarukanan mangroves on the island that had grown into towering trees. Now, Water 7 looks like a large blue cake with dozens of green candles stuck in it. Hee, this gives me a reason to recommend myself. Although it's troublesome, I help them so much, they shouldn't treat me badly, right? A tall figure with curly black hair stood on the city gate platform of shipyard number 5 on the other side of Water 7, gazing at his masterpiece and laughing loudly. I must reach the higher-ups of this world's food chain and meet those celestial dragons standing at the top. I'll start by joining the Marines. Chapter 376, a top-tier Logia joins the Marines? Over in the Demon Slayer world. Since the various countries were thoroughly beaten by the high-level combatants from the world, the situation across the entire world could truly be described as earth-shattering. As for the origin of the world government, they have also gained a general understanding. After all, the former no longer had any reason to continue concealing it, and even actively spread this information. This directly plunged countless people into prolonged shock. A world government from another world? Simply unbelievable. But the facts were laid bare before everyone. The Azure Dragon that destroyed London, the magma that swallowed up hundreds of thousands of Hairy Bear's army, the golden body Great Buddha that appeared in New Delhi and was worshipped by countless citizens, the phoenix and flame pterodactyl that soared above Washington. Even the goddess who still lingered on the European continent, accompanied by the mythical Zeus and Prometheus, constantly traveling through various countries seeking to enjoy sweets. Every single one of these things told them that the world where the world government resided was very likely the legendary Supreme Divine Realm. The political higher-ups of the various countries didn't know what to do. Gather the remaining army and start a war? It seemed they couldn't win anyway, and the army under their command definitely wouldn't agree. They had just suffered such heavy and enormous casualties. If they were asked to face a group of gods with no possibility of victory, they would likely choose to refuse the order, or even turn their muzzles on these politicians themselves. Just as the various countries were at a loss, the world government's invitation letter arrived. It stated that they could attend the reverie to be held in Zone Number 2 a month later, based on the invitation letter in their hands, to discuss the future relationship between the two worlds. This immediately caused a huge uproar and also allowed the higher-ups of many countries, and even the common citizens, to see hope. What kind of hope? For the former, it was the hope of cooperation. If they could cooperate with the world government, would they also have the chance to possess that kind of deity-like supernatural power in the future? As for the latter, it was the hope of peace, the hope of stability. Among these citizens, there were mainly 3 types of people. One type was the majority mentioned earlier, who just wanted to live their lives well and also held a certain curiosity towards the world government. The second type were those who held hatred towards the world government. At this stage, this group of people was not small. After all, countless people died in the previous suppression operation, and their relatives were naturally filled with anger. Especially in Southeast Asia, the various types of monkey country were truly killed too brutally by guys like Shiryu, Onigamo, and Doberman. Especially Shiryu, who likely massacred 2 cities, leaving behind only chickens and dogs, to the extent that no humans remained. The last type, the third, was very interesting, and their numbers were not small either. Namely, countries with a large number of religious beliefs, such as those represented by white elephant, camel, Italian wolf, and even the foot basin chicken people within Zone Number 2, as well as believers of various religions in other countries. They were welcoming, excited, and even worshipful towards the existence of the world government. Reasonably speaking, It's not strange for people who believe in Buddha to have such thoughts. After all, the golden body great Buddha did indeed descend before them. That's right. The foot basin chicken people can also be understood. After all, their traditional culture also includes the existence of the azure dragon. What about the believers of other religions? It's very simple. They think that since the divine realm where the world government is located truly contains Buddha, azure dragon, phoenix, giant, and even Zeus, Prometheus, then their own deities are likely there too. They just didn't come this time. Yes, the countless believers of various religions in the Demon Slayer world have clearly imagined the world as a place where myriad gods gather, a true divine realm. Therefore, these people wish that the world government would completely control everything in this world, so that they could also be considered people of the divine realm. In the future, it is entirely possible for them to see more deities, or even personally travel and ascend into the divine realm. It is worth mentioning. In fact, there is also a small group of people whose mindset is similar to these believers, and they also hope to have the opportunity to join the world government and go see that blue star. These people are the scientists from various countries. In their view, everything about the world government is full of mystery, representing new knowledge and new technology, especially wanting to know the method and principle behind the latter's ability to travel between worlds. Therefore, it can be said that most people in the entire Demon Slayer world are looking forward to the smooth convening of the reverie. Some far-sighted people have already realized that they are welcoming an unimaginable new era, new world, new future. Over on the world government's side, apart from Crocodile leading 200,000 army units stationed in the second special zone, Sakazuki, Bullet, Newgate, Garp, and others have already returned to the Sea Star mainland, each going back to their own homes. This experience significantly reduced the antagonistic feelings between the Marines and pirates among them. But wanting it to disappear completely is not very realistic. However, for the world government, this is already sufficient. If these high-level combatants were truly on good terms, it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing for the government higher-ups. Marine headquarters, Maniford. Everything here seemed unchanged. The magnificent fortress of justice still stood on the vast plaza, guarding the peace of the entire Great Sea. The two words justice represent the faith in the hearts of all Marines. However, the number of people seems to have decreased significantly. It no longer feels as bustling as before. Instead, there's a sense of desolation due to the sparse population. There's no helping it. The army, police, and the recently established Air Force have repeatedly drawn blood from the Marines. The key is that those bastards don't want the Marines from the Four Blues branch, only those from the headquarters. Sengoku, sitting in the Fleet Admiral's office, had been in a bad mood because of these matters, until he returned from the Demon Slayer world, after which a smile began to appear on his face. Not bad, not bad. Garp, don't just sit there eating senpai, come and look at these ironclad warships. I originally thought that being built entirely of metal, their excessive weight would severely hinder their speed. But according to these files, they are much faster than our current warships. Large warships can reach 20 to 30 knots, and small warships can even reach speeds of 30 to 40 knots. Sengoku didn't sit in his chair, he stood there, his face full of excitement, looking down at the illustrated files of various ship types on the desk, such as battleships, cruisers, and torpedo boats. Because their current warships use sails combined with paddle wheels, their speed is only around 10 knots, often unable to catch up to those lighter and smaller pirate ships. As for the accuracy of the cannons, that's even less reliable, it's purely based on luck. And the range of their cannons, it's all over 10 kilometers, some even reaching 20 kilometers. It's amazing. On the sofa, Garp nonchalantly bit into a piece of senpai and said, "It's pretty good. The question is, are the higher-ups willing to build them for us?" They are. Before I came, I made a detour to the Supreme Command and had a talk with Saint Nasajiro. Sengoku looked at him with delight and smiled. The result was very smooth. They promised to update our warships soon, and the original warships that are replaced will be converted into flying warships for the Air Force to use. Oh, that generous? They're not suppressing us Marines anymore? Garp stopped his actions in surprise. Perhaps. I guess they've finished suppressing what needed to be suppressed. Next, they will definitely strengthen the strength of us Marines. After all, the world government's base is still the world. Just as Sengoku was feeling emotional in his heart, thinking that the hard times were about to end and good times were coming, the transponder snail on the corner of the desk rang. He picked it up casually. Hello? A moment later, the Fleet Admiral's eyes widened, and a surprised smile appeared on his face. Good, bring him to Maniford immediately. After hanging up the phone, Garp looked over in confusion. What's wrong? Sengoku couldn't help but burst into laughter. Logia system. Another top-tier Logia user is going to join us Marines. Chapter 377, One Okiji is enough. On a certain sea area in the first half of the Grand Line, a marine warship was sailing rapidly across the sea surface. A tall, burly figure, bare-chested, stood at the edge of the deck, letting his long, black curly hair flutter in the wind. He wore dark sunglasses and looked up, gazing at the sea surface ahead. The slight smile on his lips showed that he was in an excellent mood at the moment. His name was Aramaki. He considered himself a powerhouse, constantly traveling between the four seas and the Grand Line, experiencing countless combat and adventures, and meeting many beautiful women. But unfortunately, none of them managed to keep him. Originally, he hadn't thought about joining the Marines, but the world government's various actions and changes recently had become increasingly significant, and their impact was something he deeply felt. In the past, he had passed through many villages and towns that had been ravaged by pirates and were a terrible sight. He had also witnessed kingdoms that were impoverished and on their last breath because of the heavenly tribute. The king and nobility of the kingdom did not, like most kingdom nobility, pass the heavenly tribute on to their citizens, making them pay the so-called double tax. Instead, they were simply unable to bear such a high heavenly tribute. Even the king's throne had been sold off years ago. This left a particularly deep impression on Aramaki. Naturally, he didn't have much goodwill towards the world government, but in recent years, things had changed. First were those few world broadcasts. He stood among the dense crowd at the time, watching with everyone around him. The reverie passed the agenda item strictly prohibiting the slave trade, cleared out all slave companies on the Sabati archipelago, and designated it as a fishman safety zone. The celestial dragons in the Holy Land Mariegeos released tens of thousands of slaves. Hundreds of thousands of slaves in the East Blues Bridge country were liberated, replaced by tens of thousands of strong prisoners from Impel Down as laborers. And there was the establishment of the G0 branch at Reverse Mountain. He had not only witnessed these events, one after another, but had also personally experienced the changes they brought to various places in the world. There were fewer pirates. Especially the pirates on the Grand Line. From being in large groups before, now he would only occasionally encounter one or two ships on the sea every 10 days or so. He also revisited the kingdom that was impoverished due to the heavenly tribute a few years ago. He went there again last month. Originally, he just wanted to see how the fruit forest and crops he had created for the citizens on the island were doing, but he unexpectedly found that the situation there had changed greatly. People were no longer thin-faced and dizzy-eyed from hunger, having to lean against walls to save energy. Instead, they could gather with their entire families, old and young, eating roast meat and drinking malt alcohol. Their clothing was no longer dirty, their neat clothes and shoes were exactly like those of citizens in wealthy countries. Most importantly, they all seemed to have their own work, busily working hard with smiles on their faces every day, and greeting each other loudly when walking on the street. But these changes weren't because of his fruit forest and crops, they were because of the world government's people. After inquiring, it turned out that a few months ago, a group of officials who called themselves economists specially dispatched by the finance department arrived here, escorted by 2 marine warships. After conducting a so-called investigation, they announced that the world government would exempt the heavenly tribute for 4 years, and then unloaded a large amount of aid supplies from the warships. Finally, they led the king, nobility, and citizens of this kingdom in what they called economic planning and economic construction. At that time, he looked at the docks, streets, pig farms, vegetable patches that had already been built, as well as the hospitals, schools, and police stations that were under construction, and his heart was very complex. The world government was truly different. And when Aramaki saw the news that Whitebeard and Big Mom, for some unknown reason, accepted recruitment, disbanded their pirate crews, and joined the command department, he decided to personally enter the world government to see for himself. He was incredibly curious about what exactly had happened. Given his ability and situation, joining the Marine headquarters was the best choice. Moreover, in order to quickly rise to a high enough position to access more advanced confidential information and facts, he felt he should design an image for himself that would make it easier to gain the trust of the world government, or rather, the celestial dragons. So, along the way, he pondered his future persona as he traveled. When he passed through Water 7, he wanted to rest there for a few days and sort out his thoughts, as it wasn't far from the Marine headquarters. But unexpectedly, he encountered the matter of the world government and Fishman Island cooperating to plant trees on Water 7 Island. This made his eyes light up. That's how the matter unfolded, and now the warship he was on was heading to Marine headquarters. And according to the reminder from the Lieutenant Colonel Captain, ship, it seemed they were arriving soon. About 20 minutes later. Wow, it's magnificent. Aramaki stood with one hand in his pocket, looking up at the giant iron gate that was slowly opening before him. The world government emblem on the gate was truly awe-inspiring. This is the legendary Gate of Justice, it's truly amazing. Then the warship suddenly shook. This was because it had connected with the whirlpool current inside, and the ship's speed instantly increased by nearly 4 knots, making the sea breeze beside him become violent. But none of this was enough to make this man, who was 3 meters tall, budge in the slightest. Soon, an island with a military atmosphere appeared before Aramaki's eyes. The magnificent fortress of justice, the large number of turrets, and the warships lined up and anchored in the port. His heart began to surge with excitement. As the warship slowly docked, he seemed unable to contain his emotions. Looking at the word justice on the giant fortress, he shouted, "I must stand at the higher-ups of the human hierarchy. Mr. Sakazuki's justice is correct. Justice can only be called justice if it is carried out to the end. I really want to meet him, he should be here too, right?" The Marines on the deck behind him exchanged glances. The major who served as captain, ship, had a strange expression. Pururu, pururu. Just then, the transponder snail in the major's coat pocket rang. As soon as he picked it up and answered, the transponder snail in his palm immediately turned into a gloomy face. "Major Chaplin, no need to bring Aramaki to Manafort, send him directly to Redport." Major Chaplin was stunned for a moment, but just as he was about to ask, he found that the transponder snail had closed its eyes. He thought to himself, "What's wrong with Fleet Admiral Sengoku? What does sending him to Redport mean? Mr. Major, can I go down now?" Aramaki seemed a bit impatient, so the major had to explain what had happened. "Huh? Why do I have to go to Redport? I want to join the Marines, I want to see Mr. Sakazuki." Aramaki immediately looked anxious. "Mr. Sakazuki, whom you want to see, is now an admiral at Army headquarters. To go to Army headquarters, you have to disembark at Redport and then ascend the Red Line." Aramaki was dumbfounded. 10 minutes ago, in the Fleet Admiral's office, Sengoku's roar erupted, and the entire Fortress of Justice seemed to tremble. This Aramaki wants to join our Marines. The Marines. Not the Army. How much talent do you intend to steal from the Marines? But the transponder snail on his desk looked at Sengoku with extreme indifference. "We've looked into it. This Aramaki is a Logia System Mori Mori no Mi ability user. His ability cannot be used on the sea and relies heavily on the presence of land. Therefore, joining the army is the most suitable. Furthermore, he strongly agrees with Sakazuki's view on justice. Sengoku, you should understand what kind of era we are in now. Every talent with high potential should be placed in the most suitable position." Sengoku was speechless, but his expression remained ashen. Until the transponder snail ended the call, he leaned back in his chair as if he had lost all strength, closing his eyes tightly. "TSK, a duck that came running on its own, it hasn't even entered the door yet and those guys have already lured it away," Garp said with a cold smile, sitting on the sofa. Seeing that Sengoku ignored him, he continued to count numbers and eat pieces of senpai. He thought it was good. A guy who agreed with Sakazuki's view on justice shouldn't come, it would just be annoying. Besides, isn't having one Okiji good enough? It's enough. Chapter 378, Zion Tiger. Green Bull appeared? On Noah's Ark, Im was quite surprised when he saw the report sent by the 5 elders. He had thought about looking for Green Bull and Fujitora before, but there was no information about where they lived in his past life memory, so he decided to let nature take its course. As long as they had aspirations, they would naturally appear on their own after the matters of the other world were revealed to the whole world. He just didn't expect them to appear so quickly. He has a strong desire for fame and fortune, admires Sakazuki, and agrees with his absolute justice that he carries out to the end. And he believes the celestial dragons are the gods of this world. Im looked at the detailed files on Aramaki and found it very interesting. If this was true, then from his stance, he was indeed a very suitable talent to cultivate, and he seemed very suitable to be his 7 warlords of the seas, secretly monitoring the higher-ups of the army headquarters for him. But since he already had a Douglas Barrett, there was no need for another one. However, this Aramaki seems more suitable to be a 7 warlords of the seas than Bullet. Marine headquarters is indeed missing a 7 warlords of the seas. Should I recruit him first, and then have the 5 elders return this Green Bull to Sengoku? Im fell into deep thought, holding the introductory medical textbook in his hand. Let's wait and see. Who knows if this guy is just acting. Besides, I trust Sengoku and Garp, so there's no urgent need for surveillance. But aren't there a bit too many experts at the army headquarters? Fleet Admiral Ryman, Admiral Burndye Ward, Sakazuki, Honorary Admiral Edward Newgate, Admiral Candidate Douglas Barrett, Sir Crocodile. And Shinjao. However, Shinjao's nature is different. He belongs to the Army Military Academy directly under the Military and Political Department, and his position is Hashokan Instructor, considered one of Zephyr's subordinates. Just like Biba Amatori, he belongs to the Army Staff Department directly under the Staff Department, and is one of Tsuru's subordinates. Now with the addition of Green Bull Aramaki, the already insufficient admiral position has become even more competitive. He will need to compete with Bullet and Crocodile. Looking at Marine headquarters, it's truly miserable, but this won't do. Although M had intentionally suppressed the strength and influence of the Marines before, he also understood their important role on the Sea Star mainland. Next, if there are suitable talents, I must leave some for the Marines. M pondered this matter in his heart. But what kind of person's ability is suitable for the Marines, and also has the potential to reach the highest combat power? Jinbi seems like a good candidate, and he's also a Fishman tribe member. As a Marine, he definitely has a talent bonus, and his height is 3 meters, meeting the standard. It's just that he's still young, and his personality makes it difficult for him to handle things alone. He seems more suitable to be an instructor, specializing in teaching Marines karate. M thought for a long time. Just as the first chime of the golden bell rang from outside, a meteor-like flash of inspiration suddenly crossed his mind. I've got it. He immediately summoned a golden Dendenmashi and gave his order to the 5 elders. The 5 elders were very surprised upon hearing it, but still respectfully agreed, stating they would handle it immediately. For the rest of the time, M continued to read the medical book in his hand, carefully memorizing its content. He didn't need to understand it now, only to memorize it so that when he performed actual operations in the future, he could immediately recall the corresponding theory. Learning medicine was mainly because he felt that knowing some of it might save his or someone else's life one day. As a transmigrator, M was very understand about the importance of knowledge. However, after less than half an hour, Stussy called, saying that the niche iron blade he had ordered from Wano Island had arrived. Subsequently, he came to the main hall outside and sat on the empty throne. The golden-red color scheme, combined with the triple high platform, made him appear like a deity high above. Stussy, wearing white gloves, held a long saber that looked extremely extraordinary with both hands and walked down the long red carpet to the platform. Lord Saint Nerona, this is the perfect niche iron blade crafted by the combined efforts of Wano Island's Mto swordsmiths and niche iron blade swordsmiths, using the craftsmanship of a supreme grade sharp sword and the highest purity scarlet iron sand, scarlet crimson ore, and sea stone. Hearing this introduction, M's interest greatly increased. With a gentle wave of his right hand, the blade automatically flew up and hovered gently before him. The scabbard had a crimson base with golden flame patterns printed on the surface. Looking further down, the tsuba was designed in a dark red sun shape, and the sword hilt matched the scabbard. Clang, the scabbard quickly separated, revealing the extremely dark blade before his eyes. The texture of the blade is very similar to Yoru. M was the first master of Black Blade, Yoru. After establishing the world government and choosing to live in seclusion behind the scenes, if a sword Dao genius appeared among the celestial dragons, he would give it to them to use, and take it back after they died. He then reached out and gripped its sword hilt. Since it was a niche iron blade, it definitely needed to be held to reveal its true appearance. Buzz, suddenly, a soft hum sounded from the blade body, followed by an extremely pure golden radiance that quickly covered the original black from the base of the blade, like paint being brushed on. At the same time, the bright blade light shone on his face, giving him a warm feeling. Seeing this, M slowly stand up, then gradually increased the force of his grip on the blade. As expected, the temperature of the blade began to rise sharply, causing the surrounding air to heat up as well. In an instant, a ball of golden red flame burned on the blade. The temperature nearby reached a level where Stussy below could genuinely feel the intense heat. So that's how it is. M narrowed his eyes, observing the radiance on the blade. A normal crimson blade, under his grip strength, would burn with flame at its strongest state. But this so-called perfect niche iron blade wasn't flame, but light, an extremely rich sunlight energy. Since that's the case, I'll give you a name related to the sundial. Let me think. For a moment, various names flashed through M's mind. Apollo, Helios, Ammon. Names of various sun gods appeared in turn. Finally, he thought of his other personal sword, Inma, and felt there was no need for a Western name. Let's call it Zai. Legend says the Golden Crow was the son of this sun goddess, which is quite fitting. M finally made his decision. Originally, Inma's partner was Hidden Rain Village no Habakyuri. However, Hidden Rain Village no Habakyuri, besides being extremely sharp, didn't seem to have any special effects. For him, the value of a blade's effect was greater than its inherent attributes like hardness and sharpness. After all, with his current sword Saint Realm and hockey mastery, even a piece of scrap iron could instantly rival a so-called great-grade sword. Stussy, pass down the order. In 3 days, the Ark will set sail. Target, the moon. Huh? Stussy below was instantly dumbfounded, even doubting if she had heard correctly. On the other side, Fishman Island, located 10,000 meters below, corresponding to Sky Island 10,000 meters above, received the latest order from the world government. Inside Ryugu Palace, King Neptune held an order document in his hand and looked excitedly at the right minister below, saying loudly, "Quickly contact the left minister in Waters 7 and have Fisher Tiger return immediately." Yes. The left minister, a seahorse fishman, also looked extremely excited. Upon hearing the instruction, he quickly turned and left. King Neptune watched his retreating figure and burst into laughter. If a fishman can truly become a marine admiral, that would be an unprecedented great opportunity for us fishmen. The world government has truly changed. It turned out that the content of the order document stated that Tiger was to be transferred to the Marine Military Academy and personally instructed by Zephyr for 3 years. If his strength could meet the requirements of the highest combat power after 3 years, they would consider granting him the admiral rank and position. However, Tiger is already 41 years old this year, and no one knows if he still has the potential to become stronger. Chapter 379, The World's Mysterious Universe? 2 days passed in a flash. Next to the giant vine, the Noah's Ark, using the hundreds of high-pressure jet devices on its ship bottom, propelled itself upwards, continuing its ascent as if resting on a cloud of white. This spectacular sight caused the construction workers below, the Shandia, as well as Teach and Pika, to subconsciously stop their actions and watch it gradually depart with various expressions. Celestial dragons. Teach still felt a sense of unwillingness. Although the dark fruit was out of the question, he recently discovered that his current 3 abilities were not weak either. Especially the special Paramshit-type cement fruit, which possessed 3 element transformation forms. Solid form, hard as steel. Liquid form, not only thick like a swamp, but according to specialized books he read, it was also poisonous, capable of causing a burning sensation or even burns on the skin. Finally, there was the powder form, which was the manifestation of a cloud of powdery cement smoke and dust. Humphrey, once I develop these abilities to a certain extent, I'll find a chance to leave this place. The Great Sea is so vast, I'll just hide. Who can find me? Teach's ambition had not completely dissipated, instead, it persisted strongly within him like a flame. Meanwhile, on the Noah's Ark Im looked up at the sky, his eyes shimmering with anticipation. This was a moon landing. Something he could only dream of in his previous life, he could now personally experience in this life. Wasn't this the charm of transmigration? However, he was now worried that as they ascended further, the oxygen content in the air would decrease, and there was also the issue of the outer space between the world and the moon. Although Enel in the canon seemed to have proven that going to the moon wasn't a difficult matter, didn't those automatons fly up using a balloon? And it seemed there was also air on the moon, allowing for breathing and sound propagation. But these were all manga content, which could only serve as reference value and couldn't be fully trusted. First of all, who knew if the balloons held by those automatons were black technology invented by Dr. Tsukimi? Furthermore, Enel was a Logia user. Perhaps element transformation truly possessed the ability to survive normally in outer space. Therefore, he had already ordered a flying warship to fly up first, to lead the way while the Holy Land garrison aboard was responsible for testing the oxygen content. Any abnormality detected was to be immediately reported back as news. Initially, Im had considered going to the moon alone with just Enel, but considering the situation just mentioned, he dismissed that idea. Also, even if he successfully arrived at the moon's surface, what then? His purpose was to find that underground city and activate the robot army. But the moon was so large, how could 2 people find it? Enel in the canon was attracted by the great explosion created by the space pirates to open up the underground city. But the time point was completely different now, so the same matter couldn't happen. Therefore, he had to bring a large contingent of troops up and rely on a large number of people and various detection equipment to search for the underground city. As for why those space pirates could accurately find the position, who knew? They were aliens. Lord St. Nerona, Captain Doyle has sent news. They are about to enter Earth-Moon space, but they haven't felt any abnormalities, and the oxygen content hasn't changed much. Commander Clement stood below and reported respectfully. Is that so? Im was very surprised to hear this. Approaching Earth-Moon space meant they were already in the middle layer, or even the thermosphere, so why were there no abnormalities? This exceeded his common sense. Or was this sea star world just that magical? About an hour later, more news arrived from there. Captain Doyle said their flying warship had already entered Earth-Moon space. However, the oxygen content was not much different from that on Sky Island. It was very stable, and their bodies didn't feel uncomfortable, just a little lighter. Im completely understood now. The universe common sense from his previous life had no meaning in this world. There was sufficient air in the outer space between the world and the moon. What else was there to say? He could only accept reality. Another 3 hours passed. At this point, The Noah's Ark was also approaching Earth-Moon space. The news from there came back again, saying that the flying warship had arrived at the moon and successfully landed on the moon's surface. The result was that air also existed on the moon. Aside from the environment being desolate and the starry sky appearing more dazzling, there wasn't much change in how their bodies felt. Oh, it was a bit cooler. Finally, the Noah's Ark traversed Earth-Moon space and arrived at a high altitude of about 200 meters above the moon's surface. This is truly magical. In this world, the moon is actually within the world's atmosphere. Within Ma and Zai had his waist, came to the deck edge and stood on the ship railing, looking down at this silver-white primordial world. To be honest, his first feeling was one of great familiarize. There was no helping it. The environment in the Room of Authority within Pangaea Castle was exactly like this environment, and he had lived there for nearly 900 years, so now he had a sense of déjà vu, as if the Room of Authority had just become much larger. Behind him, the massive golden belfry was naturally the most eye-catching, and the great snake Guakult encircling the top of the tower was also curiously observing the surrounding environment. Stussy, Enel, Tesoro, and others stood about 10 meters away from him. Clement, dispatch all the Holy Land garrison. Find that ancient underground city for this saint. Yes, Lord Saint Nerona. Commander Clement immediately accepted the order and quickly went to make the arrangement. The difficulty of this mission was visibly great. Although the Ark had tens of thousands of Holy Land garrison, it was still pitifully few when facing a moon. But they still had to do it, even if they ended up with nothing. Enel, take 3 days' worth of food and water and go search as well. Thought for a moment and sent Enel out too. He felt that perhaps fate truly existed in the unseen. Maybe Enel would be lucky enough to find it if he went. And with the speed of lightning, coming and going would be easy. Yes, Lord. Enel first bowed his head in respectful response, then raised his face filled with excitement, and instantly transformed into a blue electric flash, shooting out. Ah, that kid forgot to bring food. Tesoro was immediately speechless at this new younger brother he had taken in, but he could also understand his feelings. He himself wanted to get off the ship and walk on the moon's surface right now. Those who want to go down and see can go. After speaking, flew towards a higher point above the moon. He wanted to see at what position the air would disappear, or perhaps, it wasn't just the world and the moon, but outer space further out also had air? If it did, there was nothing more to say, he could only accept this incredible fact. But if it didn't, he also wanted to see if his current body could survive in outer space. This was a rare opportunity for an experiment. Moreover, it was very important. Chapter 380, The Star Chart's New Function, Star Fate. Vast, boundless, deep, dark, profound, mysterious, immense. Ever since creatures like humans first noticed the existence of outer space, they have used countless incredibly beautiful words to describe its every characteristic. But M's feelings at this moment were silence, coldness, and a surging heart. High above the moon, he wore a loose white robe with gold-trimmed patterns, with 2 long sabers, one purple gold and one crimson gold, hanging from his waist. His long, black, straight hair gently drifted in the windless environment. Where M was currently located, there was no air whatsoever. He had now confirmed that the world's moon indeed had its own atmosphere. Perhaps the ancient moon people had done something. He wasn't interested in researching this. If needed in the future, he would leave it to the Academy of Science. At the same time, he also confirmed 3 points. Firstly, ordinary sea star people cannot survive in outer space. Because they cannot breathe, because they cannot withstand the near absolute zero low temperature and various radiation here, and because they cannot resist the omnipresent gravity. Secondly, armament hockey can resist the ultra-low temperature and radiation here, but it is continuously consumed every minute and second. But it still cannot solve the problems of breathing and gravity. So, theoretically, as long as one possesses abundant armament hockey and flying ability sufficient to resist gravity, and brings an oxygen tank or can hold their breath for a long enough time, they could survive. And this is exactly what M was doing now. Firstly, regarding hockey, needless to say, he had also awakened flying ability through the enhancement of his 6th sense. As for air, initially, he held his breath. Later, he thought of a method, sealing a large amount of oxygen within the god's territory to form a temporary air layer. Simply put, it was essentially maintaining the emission of armament hockey to form an invisible hockey wall around him, preventing the air inside from dissipating. This kind of operation was something only M could do on the entire world right now. After all, combining the 3 colors of hockey was something even the current Whitebeard or the late Roger couldn't do. There was nothing they could do, they were still too small. However, this method was not a permanent solution. As he breathed, the air inside would also be gradually consumed, so he couldn't stray too far from the atmosphere. Finally, through Enel's test, It was confirmed that Logia users could survive normally in outer space as long as they maintained full body element transformation. Because in a state of full body element transformation, he did not need air, was not affected by the so-called ultra-low temperature and radiation, and he could also fly at high speed. This level of gravity had little impact. The point about not needing air is easy to understand. Just like Sakazuki, when he element transformed and entered an environment like the lava sea, which also has no air, he was still not affected in the slightest. Because under element transformation, he is magma itself. How could magma need air? The same logic applies to other Logia users. However, Logia users maintaining element transformation consumes a certain amount of stamina, so staying in outer space indefinitely is not realistic either. The element transformation of Logia users is actually an active skill. It requires the control of consciousness. The strongest evidence is that when a Logia user loses consciousness, they will not automatically element transform when subjected to physical attacks. But sleeping doesn't count, because people still have feeling when sleeping, and their body will subconsciously element transform when attacked. However, if they don't have flying ability, they would likely fall directly or drift off to who knows where, like Aokiji and a swamp fruit user. Oh, right. Aokiji seems to be able to create ice birds that have their own flying ability. But whether it's Aokiji or Akainu, their speed is not enough for interstellar travel. Up until now, felt that only Enel and Kizaru can operate within a galaxy. As for moonwalk among the six powers, because its principle is stepping on air, it naturally cannot be used in this airless outer space. Regardless, the value of this Logia devil fruit, through M's personal experiment this time, its value has significantly increased. This made him somewhat want to eat the Logia devil fruit himself now. Is this my planet? M stood with his back to the eternally burning scorching sun, below him the vast, boundless silver-gray ground. But in his sharp ripple eyes, there was only the aquamarine planet before him, encircled by red ribbon. So beautiful. He had never imagined he could overlook the world planet from this perspective. At this moment, M felt that he was experiencing the feeling that Superhuman had back then. He must have been just as excited the first time he overlooked Earth, right? Roar. Suddenly, along with his surging heart, an incredibly powerful and vast aura erupted from within him. The air within the entire god's territory boiled like hot water. But M paid no attention to this, still maintaining the posture of having his hands clasped behind his back, intoxicatedly admiring the full view of the world. It was the gaze of someone looking at their own territory. An indescribably intense emotion was washing over his heart. After a long time, the conqueror's haki that had been unleashed gradually subsided. Have I awakened another superpower? M felt the changes in his spirit with considerable delight. He knew this was because his heart had kept up with the strength of his soul, and his sixth sense had improved further. But just as he was about to use his new ability, his golden finger, the star chart, suddenly gave a new prompt. Without any hesitation, he immediately opened the star chart. It was simply that this star chart had too little sense of presence. Besides prompting once a year that new stargates could be opened, or like before when it reminded him that a medium stargate could be upgraded, there had been no other commotion. Advanced star chart permission requirements met, activating star fate function. Star fate? M raised an eyebrow, calming his heart to read the explanation content above. But the more he read, the more shocked his expression became, and his pupils even trembled slightly. Is this the true face of the star chart? What a terrifying thing. This so-called star fate function is mainly divided into one requirement and 3 uses. The 3 uses mean that he can control the lit-up planets through the star chart in the future, such as controlling them to move in the universe. But he must bear the consequences caused during or after the movement himself. The second use is to destroy the lit-up planets, and the process is very simple. It can still be done remotely through the star chart. For example, after activating this function, he can directly extend a finger and tap it away. The third use is also very practical. He can freely view every position of a planet through the star chart. Star fate, it's truly fitting. It's about controlling the fate of a planet. Of course. These functions also have corresponding conditions and restrictions. There aren't many requirements, just the one mentioned above. That is, it must be a planet that has been lit up and where the accumulated living time has reached 3 years. To be honest, M doesn't quite understand why. But the star chart didn't give any explanation either. It was like a rigid machine. In other words, the only planet that currently meets this requirement is the world right before my eyes. M looked speechlessly at the world body before him, emitting bright blue light. But how could he dare? So this new function couldn't be used in the short term. If he wanted to try it, he would have to find a world and stay there for 3 years. Chapter 381, The Celestial Dragon's Children. Just as M was on the moon searching for the underground city with a group of people, Holy Land Mary Ejos also welcomed a special day. It was the first day the Celestial Dragon cadets from the Celestial Dragon Holy Palace were returning home for vacation. According to the Celestial Dragon Holy Palace's school rules, each cadet had an opportunity to return home every 3 months, with a time limit of 7 days. Needless to say, all the children chose to go home. This caused the Celestial Dragon parents in the land of the gods to gather in front of the large iron gate, their eyes filled with anticipation as they waited for the school bus through the gaps in the iron bars. At this moment, these world nobles, who were seen by outsiders as either unattainable or like evil ghosts, appeared so normal. They were just a group of parents eager to see their children. Honestly, when it comes to spoiling children, there is no group in the whole world that can compare to these celestial dragons. Of course, there are also some celestial dragons with twisted psychology who don't care about their children at all. But people like that naturally wouldn't appear here. Half an hour later, 5 luxurious buses with the heavenly soaring dragon's hoof printed on their fronts stopped outside the main gate of the land of the gods. This immediately caused various surprised calls from inside the main gate. They're finally here. I wonder how my little Irene is doing. Those people didn't bully her, did they? Look, they're getting off. They're getting off. At the same time, the large iron gate that sealed off the land of the gods slowly rose under the control of the Holy Land garrison, causing some impatient celestial dragons to want to run out and pick up their children. What are you doing? An old man forcefully grabbed his son's arm, but the latter became anxious. Father, I see my son, let go of me. Idiot, have you forgotten the 5 elders' prohibition? Once you run out, you won't be able to get back in. Saint Lambert roared in anger. Ah! Saint Shilbert was stunned, then a look of lingering fear appeared on his face. He had really forgotten about that just now, that was close. Saint Lambert's angry voice also reminded the other celestial dragons who wanted to run out, causing them to stop in their tracks immediately, feeling incredibly stifled. They really didn't understand why the 5 elders prohibited them from going out. Even giving a reason would be fine. Mother. I missed you so much. Just as the atmosphere inside the main gate became strange, the celestial dragon children who got off the school buses were already running over, shouting excitedly. This made the adults stop thinking about these unhappy matters. After receiving their children, they returned to their own manners, either holding or leading them by the hand, while asking about their well-being. As soon as Saint Lambert's family returned, before everyone could even sit down, they saw their 10-year-old son say crisply to a maid beside him, "Please bring a basin of fresh water, a towel, and soap. I need to wash my hands." Ah! The maid was dumbfounded. What did she just hear Saint Violet say? Please. Although the law had completely prohibited the existence of slaves, they were now waiters working for a salary, and theoretically, they could leave whenever they didn't want to work. But who would dare to take the initiative to leave? Saint Lambert, Saint Shilbert, and his wife, Ingrid Palace, all looked at each other in disbelief. I said, "Could you please bring me a basin of fresh water, a towel, and soap? I want to wash my hands." Seeing that the maid didn't respond, 10-year-old Violet repeated himself, a little unhappy, but there was none of the irritable feeling the maids were familiar with. Okay, please wait a moment." The maid panicked, quickly bowed, and then hurried away to get the items. Ingrid Palace stepped forward and asked gently, "Son, do you want to take a bath?" "Mother, I already bathed before I came." Violet looked up and smiled at her, then put his hands into the basin of water the maid brought, carefully washing each finger. His movements seemed to follow a certain sequence and pattern. However, Ingrid Palace and the other two were more concerned about the smile he showed. It was very peaceful and full of politeness. Is this really their grandson? No. Should they say, is this really a celestial dragon's child? Then let's eat. Dinner is ready over there, there's lots of mizu meat that you love. Saint Lambert reacted and said with a smile, looking at his beloved grandson. Okay, I'll go change my clothing first. After speaking, Violet walked towards his room. It was only then that the 3 adults noticed that the clothing he was wearing was no longer the traditional celestial dragon attire. Instead, it was a well-fitting suit. A white tailcoat, white striped pants, a white sleeveless alias paired with a golden shirt underneath, and a pair of shiny bay leather boots. A golden heavenly soaring dragon's hoof was printed on his chest. Is that their school uniform? The elderly Saint Lambert frowned, looking at his grandson's back, and complained in a low voice. What kind of thing is he wearing? What's the difference between that and those low-class nobility from the lower world? However, as parents, Saint Shilbert and Ingrid Palace, although they didn't speak up to refute, felt in their hearts that their son looked more energetic. And his walking posture was also full of aristocratic beauty, neither hurried nor slow. Soon, The family sat around a dining table filled with abundant delicious food. But as soon as they started eating, the three were once again attracted by the way Violet ate. The action of cutting the meat with a knife and fork, the rhythm of only cutting the next piece after swallowing the current one, his straight posture, his calm expression. "Violet, how have you been doing there, and what have you learned? Can you tell us?" St. Gilbert finally couldn't help but ask. "It's been pretty good. Except for the first 2 weeks, which were very difficult. After getting used to it, I found it became comfortable." Hearing the question, Violet stopped his movements, recalling and narrating as he spoke. "Every day we have to get up at 7 to fold our blankets, wash up, take care of our physiological needs, and then drink a hot drink like coffee or black tea. Then at 8, we start physical training. At the time, I thought this was the most painful part. We had to follow the instructor to practice various very tiring movements. Although it was only for a short 50 minutes, it definitely made us sweat all over. But the subsequent 10 minutes of muscle massage was very comfortable. Then at 9, we entered a large number of theoretical courses: English language, WA language, mathematics, navigation, history." Just as he said this, Violet became a little excited. "Grandfather, father, mother, the most interesting part is history class. Do you know the story of our god of the celestial dragons?" This. The oldest, Saint Lambert, hesitated for a moment before saying, "The god of the celestial dragons, isn't that the ancestors of the various families who created the world government?" "No. According to historical records, the god of the celestial dragons is Lord Amu. It was he who led our ancestors to defeat the great kingdom from outside the heavens. Legend says that this Lord Amu is a true god, so he has no problem with lifespan. He is merely sleeping deep within Pangaea Castle, protecting our celestial dragon rule forever and ever." Recommendation: The Dimensional Onmyoji. Those who like integrated anime and Onmyoji themes can check it out. When Beiyi discovered he had transmigrated, he was bewildered. He thought this was just a parallel world with Onmyoji, but it turned out the matter was not that simple. Chapter 382, The Celestial Dragon's Youth Who Wants to Become Outstanding. In the land of the gods, within the Cassius family manor, over a dozen maid and a butler watched the figure rising and falling on the grass court with surprise. It was a handsome youth, about 1 meter 65 in height. He wore a tight, sleeveless white shirt on his upper body and relatively loose white pants on his lower body. The skin on his arms was fair, but one could see the slightly taut muscle lines. Pearls of sweat dripped from his head, along his cheeks and neck, converging at his chin. Every time his arms supported his body, sweat drops fell onto the grass court in the shadow. His entire body was steaming with heat, and he seemed to be trembling slightly. His expression was very tired, but he was still gritting his teeth and persisting. 320, 321, 322. Difficult low groans emerged from the youth's mouth as his movements became slower and slower, until he counted to 404 and collapsed onto the ground, exhausted. St. Longinus Lord. "Quick, bring the salt water." The butler panicked, running up with a towel while urging the maid. "Po." The youth sat up, panting heavily. As he took the towel, he expressionlessly said thank you. And silently recited in his heart, expressing gratitude for the contribution of inferiors is a basic etiquette that reflects the quality and cultivation of a world noble. This was one of the rules taught in etiquette class. However, his behavior caused the butler to quickly say he wouldn't dare, stating that it was what he should do. "That's right, that is what you should do, but what I said is also what I should do," the 15-year-old Longinus said coldly. The butler didn't dare speak again. He could see that this celestial dragon's youth wasn't sincerely thanking him, but rather performing a novel form of etiquette. "What's wrong with our son? How did he become like this?" In the distance, within the 3-story luxury villa covering an area of over 1,000 square meters, St. Eliot and Pallas Gloria stood on the spacious balcony on the 2nd floor. The latter, as the mother, looked worriedly at Longinus, who was sitting cross-legged on the grass court, resting with his eyes closed. "Humphrey, he just woke up this morning and came to me, saying he wanted to find a cipher pal guard to spar with him, and even claimed he wanted to become strong. It's simply nonsense." St. Eliot's face was full of anger. "Then you refused?" "Of course. Why should we celestial dragons become strong? Who in this world dares to harm us? Even if there are audacious fools, the Marine Admiral and the Holy Shield are naturally responsible for handling them." In his view, training was something only inferiors should do. But looking at our son, it seems the celestial dragon Holy Palace is teaching them these things. Pallas Gloria said worriedly. "That's why I say it's all nonsense." In his own home, St. Eliot said whatever he wanted without any scruples. On the other side, feeling that his aura had almost recovered, Longinus stand up again, preparing to continue training. He couldn't let his body completely cool down, as that would greatly reduce the effect. This was content taught in physical technique class. He saw that he had asked for a wooden sword that had the same weight as a real blade but was not sharpened. At the same time, he began continuously adjusting his breathing rhythm. This was new content taught in sword technique class 2 weeks ago. They said it was a breathing style, and also required them, the cadet, to first master the level of total concentration, which means being able to enhance their physical ability by breathing oxygen when concentrating their spirit. And before graduation, they must reach the level of constant concentration, which is to turn this breathing rhythm into their instinct, maintaining it even when sleeping. This was considered one of the items in the graduation assessment. He heard that this breathing style had many different styles. Generally speaking, one needed to choose a style that suited oneself based on personal personality. But the breathing style taught to them, these cadet, was unified. Sun breathing. First form, round dance. Second form, clear blue sky. The next moment, Longinus meticulously displayed one different sword technique movement after another. Although because he hadn't mastered the breathing style yet, the flame special effect did not appear on the blade. But the determination in that gaze was enough to make the surrounding butlers and maid look sideways. Even Saint Talyat and Pallas Gloria on the second floor could also feel that their son's attitude was serious, which made them somewhat uneasy. Because their son had become unfamiliar, and he had only stayed in the Celestial Dragon Holy Palace for 3 months. That's right. Longinus's mood at this moment was resolute. Initially, he just liked the feeling of his body gradually becoming strong and powerful. Until later, he knew everything. Because of his 15 years of age, his grade was considered the highest grade in the academy, so he could access relatively advanced information. For example, matter about the Stargate and Otherworld. After all, in this regard, there was no need to hide anything from them. How many in the high and middle levels of the world government don't know now? Another world, countless unknown world, were originally the best attraction. Coupled with another regulation. At 18 years old, they will undergo a graduation assessment. Those who pass successfully will be awarded the elite epithet and given a high-grade resource, such as high-quality devil fruit or umto. It is said that in the future, some high-value resources from the other world will be added for selection, but obviously, the graduates of this first batch won't encounter them. And after graduation, they will be assigned to various departments to undergo 2 years of tempering. Those who perform outstandingly after 2 years even have the opportunity to represent the celestial dragons and be sent to the other world, to freely rule and develop according to their own preferences. The only requirement is to obey the world government's order. Equivalent to a FOF. It's just that this FOF is a bit large, a planet. But if the assessment fails, that's okay too. They can choose to stay at the school and study for another year, and then be given a second assessment opportunity. But if they fail this time too, they will be sent back to the land of the gods. If there are no special situation, don't even think about coming out in this lifetime. Just muddle along and wait for death inside. This made Longinus feel a strong sense of urgency. I must go out. There are clearly countless wonderful world outside, my life absolutely cannot be trapped in this place. If only by becoming an elite can I have freedom, only then can I have strength, then I, Longinus, must become the most outstanding among the celestial dragons. Under such intense emotional fluctuations, his blade-wielding movements unconsciously became skilled. The originally somewhat intermittent breathing rhythm also began to gradually smooth out. A moment later, just as he performed the 5th round of the 10th form, Brilliant Blessing, that top-down spiral / actually emitted blazing flame as hot and bright as the Sunday. This scene made this celestial dragon's youth pause for a moment. But this caused his breathing rhythm to break, and his active spirit also returned to calm. The flame on the blade also extinguished accordingly, but the flame in his pupil grew brighter and brighter. I want to become a powerhouse. A powerhouse among celestial dragons. 7 days of vacation time passed by with Longinus's sweat. This day, the 15-year-old Longinus stood in the first-floor hall, expressionlessly looking at Saint Talyat and Pallas Gloria, who were preparing to seeing off him. Father, Mother, this is the first time I've had a vacation at home, and it will be the last time before graduation. In the next 3 years, I will devote all my energy to studying and training, to make myself more outstanding and strong every day. After speaking, completely ignoring his sad mother and his father's angry shouting, he strode out of his own villa without looking back. Chapter 383, The Moon's Underground City and Technology. On the moon of the world, Im had returned to his palace and was sitting in a comfortable chair, tapping his finger in the seemingly empty air in front of him. If an outsider were to see this, they would likely find it very strange. But this was his bedroom. At this moment, tens of thousands of the Holy Land garrison were currently searching the moon's surface for the whereabouts of an underground city, and no one knew how long it would take them to find it. So Im was now using the new function of the star chart to quickly examine every space underground on the moon. According to the description of this star fate function, this moon belonged to the world's satellite, so the time requirements were shared, including the other 7 satellites. He was now like someone manipulating a moon projection model, freely changing the perspective, zooming in and out at will, and even layering the interior. In scientific terms, it should be called holographic projection? At first, Im's mind associated it with Iron Man from the Marvel Universe and the telescope technique from Naruto. With this function, he could remotely monitor every corner of the world and the moon, and it was definitely a real-time screen feed, the kind that came with sound. Found it. A moment later, Im's eyes lit up. The virtual moon looked like a cake cut into pieces, with various detached surface fragments floating around him. In one area where the outer layer was removed, many stone buildings and stone houses appeared inside. Zooming in further. Sure enough, white-clothed robots, each about 1 meter in height, with wings on their backs, holding spears, and wearing yellow helmets, stood in small compartments. Metal pipelines were laid out around them, full of a punk-style machinery style. Stussy passed down the order. All personnel are to return to the Ark, then fly 125 kilometers to the west. Im immediately picked up a transponder snail and issued the order. Yes, Lord Saint Nerona. Ending the call, Im continued to observe the underground city through the virtual moon, thinking about finding something that looked useful. But he truly didn't recognize the various mechanical equipment inside. Never mind, I'll just have people from the Academy of Science come and take a look later. Maybe they can find other moon people technology. Actually, Im felt it was fine even if they didn't find anything else. These automatons alone were already of considerable value. This was black technology that could endow robots with wisdom, emotion, and a soul. Doorman, Astro Boy. Im immediately thought of these, and even had a mind to take Enel directly there, but then felt there was no need to rush, these things wouldn't run away. However, this moon can no longer be ignored like before. People must be sent here to garrison it, lest aliens arrive one day without us knowing. Let the Air Force be responsible for it then. They're close by anyway. Within the world, on Baltimore Island, where the Academy of Science headquarters was located, Vegapunk, with his exceptionally long skull, was in his exclusive research room, examining a square-shaped silver metal illuminated by the lights on a test bench. It's finally a success, punk metal. He had been researching for several years how to combine lineage factor with metal, which was referred to as shape memory alloy in that small booklet. Later, he obtained the Parimsha system Munch Munch fruit granted by the world government, and through the devil fruit's extraordinary power, he successfully created a piece of steel possessing animal lineage factor. Although the strength of this alloy itself didn't change much, it possessed the ability to self-heal like flesh and blood. But this wasn't what he truly wanted. Materials that could only be created entirely through devil fruits had too many limitations. What he wanted was an alloy purely synthesized through technology, as only that could achieve the effect of full mass production. And the metal before him was exactly this. Its effect was no different from the alloy he created using the Munch Munch fruit. Next is to figure out how to make this metal possess devil fruit ability. Vegapunk actually already had an idea. First, find an animal system devil fruit. It inherently comes with lineage factor and beast soul, so the difficulty shouldn't be very high. Also, the alloy's self-healing speed is a bit slow. Later, I'll ask the Biochemical Research Institute for a piece of Mizunkibutsuji's flesh and blood. Regarding strength, I can try fusing Kabanrai World's heart membrane. Ever since the world government helped him solve the cold problem on his hometown, Baltimore Island, his anger towards the world government for kidnapping him completely dissipated. Now, he only wanted to use the technology he researched to help the world government continuously grow stronger. This also benefited him, as only when the world government became strong could it acquire more other world technology and materials for him. Pururu, what is it? Dean, the world government has sent news. They discovered an ancient moon people underground city on the moon, containing thousands of robots with self-awareness and emotions. Therefore, they order us to immediately organize a research team and await the arrival of the flying warship. The transponder snail was shouting with extreme excitement, causing Vegapunk to raise an eyebrow. Giving robots their own emotions, wasn't that Dr. Tsukimi's research project? That Dr. Tsukimi was also here at this time. He and Vegapunk were both from Baltimore Island, so it was no surprise that he was also invited into the Academy of Science. Understood. I will make a trip this time. Also, notify Dr. Tsukimi to go together. Regarding the ancient technology of the moon people, it was impossible for him not to be curious. This was a basic quality of a scientist. He immediately began sealing the punk metal in front of him. At the same time. Meanwhile, in the Demon Slayer world, The higher-ups of various countries successively arrived at the major ports of Special Zone Number 2 aboard warships. Even the Great John Bull country, whose capital was destroyed, and the Indonesian Monkey country, whose 2 cities were massacred, sent people over, suppressing their anger. But upon seeing those tall and strong army soldiers, and even the army officers who were over 2 meters in height and turned into afterimages when they moved, all their anger and hatred were replaced by shock, followed by extreme fear. This world government actually had so many superhumans? 2 weeks later, government officials from over 100 countries gathered at the National Diet building in Tokyo, and the person responsible for presiding over this revelry. It was none other than Senior Director Addison, who had previously served as the Stargate base commander in the Kabaneri world and had been awarded the West Third-Class Medal by the 5 Elders. Oh, he had been promoted. He was now the Minister of the World Government Branch in Special Zone Number 2 of the Demon Slayer world, equivalent to the leader in government affairs, and on the same level as the leader in military affairs, Crocodile. Now, please open the white paper on your tables and look at our world government's arrangement and decision regarding the countries of this world. Minister Addison stood proudly on the central podium, his expression arrogant, scanning the higher-ups of various countries who had begun to lower their heads and read the content of the treaty, enjoying the angry expressions and disbelieving gazes that gradually appeared on their faces. What? You want to take our military power? Impossible. These terms are outrageous. Except for the currency unification, none of them are acceptable. But just as these people were shouting angrily one after another, Minister Addison suddenly brought down the wooden gavel in his hand with a heavy snap, silencing all the dissatisfied noise. It seems everyone has misunderstood something. This meeting is not for discussion, but for notification. Understood? Chapter 384, Mizan Kibutsuji is no longer a demon? The convening of the revelry in the Demon Slayer world only represented the preliminary completion of the world government's conquest of this world. Next, as the higher-ups of these countries return with the white paper, it will inevitably trigger a wave after wave of undercurrents, and even overt resistance. Crocodile and Addison's job is to resolve these troubles for the world government. For this, Crocodile ordered the 200,000 army to leave only 60,000 to guard the second special zone. The other 140,000 army, led by a group of vice admirals, were stationed in major powerful nations like the UK, White-Headed Eagle, Hans Tiger, France, and Thailand for a period of time. Among these vice admirals were Onigamo, Doberman, Dalmatian, Stainless, Charlotte Daifuku, Charlotte Oven, Charlotte Cracker, Diamond Jazu, and others. As for Shiryu, Crocodile sent him back to the Sea Star mainland to continue serving as a vice admiral under Sakazuki. There was nothing else he could do. Even Crocodile was startled by Shiryu's bloodlust. After all, for the world government, conquest is not the goal, rule and obtaining resources are. In the time that followed, the world government needed to continue cleaning up the rats within the second special zone, while also making the Foot Basin chicken people completely accept reality. The former is the work of Cypher Paul, while for the latter, Minister Addison formulated a propaganda plan based on the situation in Thailand. That is, to widely declare and spread the notion that the Sea Star world is the divine realm and the world government is the government of gods. For this, he even specifically had the propaganda department create a propaganda video. The content was screen feeds of Sakazuki, Big Mom, Kaido, Whitebeard, Aokiji, Kizaru, Marco, King, and others displaying their abilities and techniques. Then, through the high-definition virtual video of the visual Denden Mushi, it was broadcast twice a day in the major cities of the second special zone. He also reached cooperation with Crocodile, having the vice admirals leading the army to be stationed in various countries bring them along as well. The effect of this propaganda was astonishing. To say nothing else, most of the Foot Basin chicken people within the second special zone completely believed this narrative. They no longer resisted, no longer hated, and their attitude instead shifted towards worship, fanaticism, and excitement. This greatly satisfied the other World Strategy Committee, and they simultaneously proposed to the 5 elders, the higher-ups, to have the Religious Affairs Department be specifically responsible for these matters. However, the 5 elders in Holy Land Mary Ejos had some doubts about this. Inside the room of authority. What do you think of this report? Should we deify ourselves? Saint Topman Warcurry looked hesitantly at the document on the coffee table. I think we can. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn, who was always dominant, said expressionlessly while wearing round glasses. Up until now, whether it's the human physique in the Kabaneri world or this Demon Slayer world, they are very fragile. Compared to them, we Sea Star people can indeed be called divine persons. Officer-level combat power can even be called deities without any sense of incongruity. The problem is that we celestial dragons have always claimed to be descendants of gods. If the entire Sea Star is deified, then what does that make us? Saint Marcus Mars, who was responsible for history and technology, stood to the side and raised an objection in a deep tone. This. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn frowned, having nothing to say. Furthermore, for us, the existence that can truly be called a god is only Lord Imu. Therefore, this old man thinks this matter should be reported, and let Lord Imu make the decision. Saint Marcus Mars continued speaking, and his words were also greatly agreed upon by the other four. Alright then, I will report the situation to Lord Imu later. After speaking, Saint Topman Warkuri changed the topic and revealed a not-so-pleasant smile. Next, let's talk about the subsequent development plan for the Demon Slayer world. Let's create a basic outline for the Otherworld Strategy Committee to set the direction. Then this old man will first talk about the military aspect. First, we need to quickly update the Navy's warships and submarines. They are still too rudimentary now. Let the Academy of Science improve them. I remember you have a doctor over there who specializes in researching submarines, right? Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn looked at Saint Marcus Mars standing there. This Saint Marcus Mars seemed to have legs that were too long, causing him not to like sitting on the sofa much. Dr. Wolf has already seen the Demon Slayer World submarine files and is currently researching them. I reckon it won't be long before results are produced. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn nodded in satisfaction and said again. Also those airplanes, they are too small, too slow, too fragile, and cannot even carry weapons. What a coincidence, Dr. Wolf is also very interested in this type of aircraft, so this aspect is also handed over to him. Saint Marcus Mars smiled. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn stopped speaking. The Demon Slayer world's army equipment is really not good. Those field artillery and so on are simply not worth considering. The Sea Star side has plenty of better ones. The unification of currency, the implementation of laws, these can be done slowly. Let's talk about it after the situation there stabilizes. However, the transportation channels for mineral resources must be completed as soon as possible. The one speaking this time was Saint Shepherd Jupiter. What he meant was to use the Demon Slayer world's resources to manufacture their own things. Speaking of which, the Sun Mountain that produces the main material for niche iron blades has already been found. We also found the blue spider lily that Ms. Nkibutsuji mentioned there. Saint Topman Warkuri first had Chief of Staff Alexander Watson, who was waiting nearby, open the visual Denden Mushi, and then continued speaking. However, according to Dr. Kira of the Medical Academy, that is actually Lycaris sporangeri. It's just that under the environment of Sun Mountain, it absorbed enough sunlight, so the petals emit a faint blue light. On the projected virtual screen, a large area of faint beautiful blue light surrounded a seemingly ordinary mountain peak. This is a good thing. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn grinned and laughed. That mouthful of beard and the scar on his face made him look a bit terrifying. But when it comes to personality, he is the most amiable among the people present, especially his attitude toward Scarp is greatly admired. How so? Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn looked at him with a curious gaze. This requires talking about the origin of Ms. Nkibutsuji's physique. Because Ms. is currently working inside Impel Down, this Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn, who oversees the judiciary, had specifically learned about his matters before. He first introduced Miz's background, then smiled. If Ms. Nkibutsuji hadn't killed that doctor prematurely back then, but had patiently drunk the last dose of the complete medicinal soup, then he wouldn't have become a man-eating demon. Instead, he would have become one who isn't afraid of light and doesn't need to eat humans, a perfect superhuman. However, his appetite would also greatly increase accordingly. Hearing what you mean, Ms. Nkibutsuji is no longer a demon? Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn's eyes lit up, because a guess suddenly formed in his mind. Yes, he is no longer a demon. At this moment, Saint Marcus Mars also spoke. That doctor's prescription from several hundred years ago is clearly much better compared to Dr. Tamayo's prescription from the Medical Academy. Although the latter's prescription can also turn demons back into humans, they will also lose all of the demon's strength. Is that so? Then the immortality effect is also present? Then are we? For a moment, whether it was Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn or Saint Topman Warkuri, even that Chief of Staff Alexander Watson, also looked at Saint Marcus Mars with excitement and nervousness. Sigh, this old man had also thought about it before. But according to the experiment by the Biochemical Research Institute, that prescription was specifically tailored by that doctor based on Miz's stillborn infant physique. Saint Marcus Mars had long anticipated this point and sighed. However, this old man has already ordered the Biochemical Research Institute to cooperate in research with the Medical Academy. As for when results will be produced, that is unknown. Chapter 385, The Decision for the Third Stargate and Magellan's New Lunchbox. Deified World Government and World? Inside Noah's Ark on the Moon, Im frowned as he looked at the report sent by the five elders. The proposals on it not only suggested promoting the world as the divine realm but also giving Sakazuki, Kaido, and others their own god names. For example, God of Lava, Sakazuki, and then designating them as subordinate gods to himself, the god of celestial dragons, Lord Mu. It sounded good, but felt it was improper, very improper. Firstly, having encountered King Yama, he already knew that beings like gods and demons truly existed in this world. And since the worlds on the other side of the Stargates were basically Japanese anime worlds, there must also be worlds where other gods and demons existed. Wouldn't that just make it a joke then? Moreover, after being deified, would the world government still be the world government? Wouldn't it become something like a divine court or immortal court? Then this book would become a case of selling dog meat under the guise of a sheep's head. Besides, even if they were to be called gods, it should be his unique identity, not something distributed to everyone in the whole world. What kind of logic was that? Even the celestial dragons could only be descendants. Also, are the 5 elders mistaken? The celestial dragons are clearly the descendants of the creator. Compared to the title of god, preferred the title of creator, or even old ancestor of the celestial dragons was quite good. How did that saying go? A god might be a creator, but a creator could also be a human. The key was that he didn't think being a human was any worse than being a god, even if he truly possessed the power of a god in the future. He still felt it was better to be a human. So, decided to prohibit the 5 elders and the world government below them from deifying themselves externally anymore. No matter what those other worlders thought or said, they themselves had to ensure the purity of the world government. In the future, various monsters, races, and even gods and demons, monsters, and Buddhas might join, but the world government would still be the world government. They could be the world government of the all heavens, the world government of the multiverse, the world government of the universe, but definitely not something like the divine court of the divine realm. Besides, world government, what a great name. Sincerely felt it was much more imposing than titles like divine court. However, it is true that I can start spreading legends externally about my slumber or seclusion for several hundred years. I can't always hide behind the scenes. Especially when the world government encounters situations that admiral-level combat power cannot handle in the future. Felt that his reappearance must be sufficiently shocking, preferably at a critical juncture, at a moment when everyone was helpless and utterly in despair. Not just casually publishing a newspaper to let everyone eat a bland and unexciting big melon during peacetime. That would be meaningless. Mizan Kibutsuji is no longer a demon. Looked at the content of the second report in surprise. After reading it, he also felt it was a great pity that the prescription couldn't be applied to everyone. If it could, its value to the entire world government would be immense. Just think, if the middle and high-level combat power, everyone, had Mizan's near-infinite self-healing and regeneration ability, how terrifying would that scene be? And Mizan's cellular-level control over his own cells, his near-infinite stamina, and his immortality with an unknown lifespan limit. The current Mizan Kibutsuji was definitely a great treasure for the Biochemical Research Institute. With the continuous improvement and progress of biochemical technology in the future, he believed that one day, through his lineage factor, they would be able to create powerful gene enhancement serums. Was firmly convinced of this. Even if the world's technology level wasn't high enough, wasn't there the multiverse opened by the Stargates? So, keeping Mizan in Impel down is the right decision. This kind of high-value treasure cannot be released for conquest, and we don't lack him as a combat power. Thought to himself with a pleasant mood. Just at this moment, outside Noah's Ark, Dr. Vegapunk and Dr. Tsukimi, who had arrived by flying warship, were busy in the underground city with a group of Academy of Science researchers. But every one of them had an excited expression on their faces, occasionally chatting with the automatons, trying to get more information from them. However, only silently observed these matters and didn't interfere too much. He believed that leaving professional matters to professional people was what a qualified ruler should do. He only needed to make good use of the results they produced. Speaking of which, I still have a third Stargate I can open, but... In the spacious bedroom, which was over 100 square meters, sat at a desk piled high with medical books, pondering while looking at the star chart that only he could see. The Demon Slayer world has just been conquered, and the world government is in the stage of digesting it. Opening another other world at this time would be too hasty, and the previous Kabanrai world is the same. Completely taking over the resources of a world was not an easy matter. Even with the scale of the world government, facing an entire planet with a complete civilization required sufficient time to process slowly. Therefore, he had to give them time to digest. Take Cypher Paul, for example. They not only had to ensure normal monitoring of the Sea Star mainland but also send people to handle the matters of the Kabanrai world and the Demon Slayer world. Especially the latter, Hundreds of civilized nations required a large number of personnel to be dispatched. They were actually almost depleted. And the training of new personnel could not be rushed. Work like agent and spy could not be done shoddily. So, they had to wait until the situation in the Demon Slayer world stabilized before transferring most of the personnel back to headquarters. This was the healthy approach. The same principle applied to the department officials of the world government branch. Let's give them 1 year. Next year, I'll open the third Stargate, and then based on the situation of this third world, choose one Stargate to upgrade to medium-sized, accelerating the efficiency of development in that world. Im made a decision in his heart. Meanwhile, inside the warden's office on the 4th level of Impel Down's blazing hell, Magellan sat on a nearby sofa, watching Ms. Nkibutsuji receive a set of off-white uniforms with a brown wide-brimmed hat from Warden Columbus. Congratulations, you are now the chief guard here. Do a good job. You can rest assured, I like it here very much. Ms. Nkibutsuji had a smile on his face and his attitude was very humble. After nodding to Magellan, he left the office. Ultimately, he was assigned to the prison guard team of Impel Down, not the researchers of the Biochemical Science Academy. This was because the latter might leave Impel Down for missions, but the former could not unless they officially retired or were transferred to another department. Although the green ring on his neck was still there, his shadow at his feet had returned, which could be considered a form of preferential treatment. As for why the green ring was kept, mainly because Mizen's biological transformation ability was even more powerful than Kurizumi Higurashi's copy fruit. No one could guarantee that he wouldn't sneak out. But the pet ring could. Another worlder actually became the chief guard here. We've really encountered a magical era. Magellan sighed. Hey, indeed. This old man is also looking forward to the changes in the future. I hope to see more interesting things. Saying this, Warden Columbus took out a black box from under the desk, placed it on the desk, opened it, and laughed. Oh right, this is a new food container specifically made for you by the Academy of Science based on your situation. Try it when it's mealtime later. What's this for? Magellan stood up and looked at the contents inside curiously. They said it's a vacuum-sealed packaging device. You can put the prepared food inside, then press this switch, and it will turn the food into a fluid that doesn't affect the taste. You can just suck it up using the straw here. Warden Columbus looked gently at the young person in front of him, who was likely the next warden. This way, your breathing won't contaminate the food anymore, causing you to have diarrhea every day. Really? Magellan's eyes lit up, and he became excited. Chapter 386, The Restless Demon Slayer World. In the Demon Slayer world, Special Zone Number 2, the World Government Branch in Kyoto was established in the former Kyoto City Government Building. It was a bit small for C-star person, both in area and height. So this was just a temporary location. In the future, it would definitely need to be torn down and rebuilt into an office building. Inside the most spacious office, located on the top floor, Minister Addison lay back in his boss's chair, quietly looking down at the ancient-style Kyoto scenery outside the floor-to-ceiling window, but his expressionless face revealed an unhappy mood. The main reason was that the deification world government plan he had previously reported back to the homeland was rejected yesterday, and he was also ordered not to conduct similar deification propaganda again. The reason given was that there was only one creator in the C-star world, and that was the ancestor of the celestial dragons, Lord Amu. His deification plan was suspected of blaspheming the celestial dragons. Considering his previous merit and the medals he had been awarded, the 5 elders had specifically granted forgiveness this time, but if he committed the offense again, he would have to go to an ice lobby. This left Addison terrified at the time, his shirt soaked with cold sweat. Blaspheming the celestial dragons? This was absolutely the second most serious crime within the world government, second only to harming a celestial dragon. But he also felt somewhat wronged in his heart. His plan was clearly beneficial to the world government, but these emotions he could only suppress deep inside. However, this also allowed Minister Addison to learn some hidden information. So, the ancestor of the celestial dragons was called in. Knock, 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 come in. Minister, this is the intelligence document sent from Cypher Paul. A tall, beautiful secretary wearing a black professional dress pushed open the door and walked in, bending over to place a newly received document on the office desk. Minister Addison nodded, while his gaze flickered towards the other party's smooth white cleavage. Just as she turned to leave, he chuckled softly. Cherry, accompany me to Fushimi Inari Shrine at 5 o'clock. I heard it's some kind of shrine main hall there. Then we can find a hot spring nearby to relax. The secretary paused, then turned her face and chuckled sweetly. Okay, I happen to enjoy traveling too, and I'm very interested in the scenery of this other world. After speaking, under Minister Addison's aggressive gaze, she swayed her sexiness waist and walked out of the office. This also made the former's mood cheerful. Addison had struggled within the world government for half his life, and in middle age, he was fortunate enough to become one of the first officials to reap the benefits of the other world. Now he was considered successful and held a high position, so he felt he was qualified to start enjoying himself. In fact, Addison had also thought about trying the taste of the foot basin chicken, derogatory term, beauties from this other world. But after a period of getting to know them, he found that these foot basin chicken person were simply like a group of dwarves, even more outrageous than the people of the sun in the Kabinari world. Their average height was basically around 1.6 meters, and those around 1.5 meters were everywhere. In this situation, no matter how delicate their face was, these sea star people couldn't be interested. Moreover, a saying was gradually starting to spread internally. That the bloodline of sea star people was more advanced and they should not easily combine with other worlders, as it would pollute the family's bloodline, and the children born would become short and weak waist. This directly led to both the army soldier and the government official being able to maintain their integrity with an arrogant attitude when faced with various temptation from otherworld women. This also left the foot basin chicken person hiding in the shadows, trying to cause trouble, helpless in this regard. World Alliance Fleet. Opening the file bag, Minister Addison took out the intelligence inside and glanced at it. The content on it made him raise an eyebrow in surprise. It turned out that after the previous reverie was held, those so-called strong countries were still unwilling to submit and even more unwilling to accept the overly harsh treaty. So they were preparing to unite and form a super fleet comprising all their battleships, destroyers, and other warships, to have a decisive battle with the world government. If they lost this time too, they would bow their heads and accept rule, but what if they happen to win? Hey! Overestimating themselves, Minister Addison sneered disdainfully, then picked up a transponder snail and communicated with Vice Admiral Crocodile. Yes, I've decided to suspend the operation of dispatching troops to garrison the various countries on my end. We'll talk about it after dealing with their so-called World Alliance fleet. The transponder snail, which had taken on Crocodile's appearance, spoke unhurried. Why not just let the cipher pal in each country take action and eliminate the military and government higher-ups who want to form the alliance? Minister Addison offered his opinion. In his opinion, there was no need at all to let them form a large fleet. No, I want them to complete their formation, then sail right in front of us, and then we'll have a proper Great Sea battle. Inside the army base, Crocodile bit on his cigar and grinned amidst the thick smoke as he spoke. Because this is the last bit of fighting spirit they have left. I want to use this battle to completely break the spine of this world and make them completely submit under the world government's flag. After listening, Minister Addison was silent for a moment, then asked. Is there any support we can provide from our side? Yes. Prepare enough visual den mushi. I want everyone in this world to witness this war. Crocodile narrowed his eyes, his tone very strong. All right. Minister Addison hung up the phone, and after thinking for a moment, Crocodile also picked up a transponder snail and called the Stargate base located within the Okigahara forest. According to the latest regulations of the world government, combat on land is the responsibility of the army, while combat at sea is the responsibility of the Marines. Although this was another world, he still felt he should comply. The main reason was that he really disliked fighting on the Great Sea, and incidentally, it would save face for Fleet Admiral Sengoku on the Marine side. If it were Douglas Barrett, he certainly wouldn't do such a thing, but Crocodile felt that since he was going to operate within the world government, he would inevitably have to deal with these big shots in the future. As for how those Marines would fight after they arrived, he wouldn't bother with that. A few days later, Q's, who had come once before, led 30,000 Marines and began queuing to enter the Stargate. There was no other way, the Marines were currently short on talent, so they could only send him over. Next, they had to quickly learn how to operate the original battleships and destroyers of the Geopenji nation. After all, nothing could help them familiarize themselves with the performance of the new warships faster than actual combat. But just as the Alliance and the world government were sharpening their blades, each preparing for a major collision, the White Elephant countries suddenly jumped out.